Chapter 113. Child, you are exceptionally intelligent. Why did you lose your sense of propriety this time and cause such a huge trouble? A voice rang out from the radiance in the sky that resembled the sun. Yeah. In the celestial maiden's bosom, a baby in swaddling clothes was crying. It seemed that the dazzling light in the sky had attracted the baby's attention. The baby stared at the light in the sky and waved its little hand as if it wanted to reach out and grab the light. Ah! In the dazzling light in the sky, a soft voice came out. Then, an invisible energy fell down. It was like a multicolored light. Then, it wrapped around the baby in the arms of the woman. Within the multicolored light, there were talismans moving. Its aura was shocking. Unbelievable. Really unbelievable. The voice in the sky became more and more surprised. Then, a multicolored light came down and landed on the baby whose heart had stopped beating. The talismans wrapped around the baby. Finally, the light disappeared and the voice came out again. The girl is gifted. She was born a holy sovereign. The boy was born with an incomplete martial vein. He was born mediocre. However, he was lucky. He still had a chance to live. Gifted. She was born a holy sovereign. When the voice came from the sky, the figures in the light looked at the swaddling clothes in the woman's arms in shock. How powerful was a natural holy sovereign? Fine, I will make the decision today. Ao Tong, bring your daughter back to the clan. As long as that father and son live in seclusion and never meet you and your daughter again, I will protect their lives. No one will be able to touch them. A voice rang out from the sky. Ancestor. The woman pleaded. Do you want the father and son to die today? The voice in the sky came out. This is the final decision. No one can talk about it. Let's leave it at that. As the voice fell, the dazzling light in the sky faded away. There was no more sound. Du Tingxian, you and that trash bastard live in seclusion. If anything happens, the ancestor will not protect you. The figure within the brightest halo shot a glance at Du Tingxian and the little fellow in his arms. There was no pity in his eyes, only a look of superiority and disdain. Roar roar. Ao. One by one, the godlike figures left on ferocious birds and beasts. The otherworldly woman looked back at Du Tingxian, who was kneeling beside the little guy with tears all over his face. Tears streamed down her delicate face, but she had no choice but to gradually disappear into the distant sky. After these figures left, only after a long time did the birds and beasts in the mountains dare to move. Only then did sounds come from the vast and silent mountains. Xiaofu. Du Tingxian hugged the soft little fellow tightly in his arms and kept shouting. Even when he injected his profound qi into it, it was to no avail. 2 hours later, the little guy in the swaddling clothes had a deathly pale complexion. His chest had stopped moving, and the last trace of breath had disappeared. Xiaofu. Du Tingxuan's eyes glazed over as he stared at the baby in swaddling clothes. Time gradually passed, and night fell. The bright moon hung high in the sky. On the mountain peak, Du Tingxuan's figure was still holding the little fellow in his arms. He stood motionless until late at night. Rumble. Suddenly, high up in the sky, a fierce thunder sounded out of nowhere. Suddenly, the sky changed color. Thick dark clouds covered the sky, mixed with lightning and thunder. The flickering curtain of night was as bright as day. Heaven and earth suddenly darkened, and the ground shook. In the mountains, the tides of the rivers rose and fell. The fierce thunder on a clear day resounded in the sky for a long time. In this side of the mountains, tens of thousands of beasts were galloping and roaring, worshipping the sky. They were inexplicably terrified. Boom! Above the sky, an ancient energy fell from the sky. The majestic aura was oppressive. The energy was ancient and wild, as if it had passed through the shackles of time and space, and then fell on the little fellow in Du Tingxuan's arms. Rumble. The whole world seemed to be awakened at this moment. The earth trembled and roared, rolling from afar, as if tens of thousands of beasts were galloping. Huge cracks appeared in the endless mountain range. The towering trees collapsed one after another, the mountains shattered, and the abyss shifted. Divine thunder of the heavenly generals, the heavenly might descends, a vision of heaven and earth. Xiaofu. Du Tingxian was shocked. Under the heavenly might, his body trembled. Holding the little fellow in his arms, he welcomed the baptism of the energy that had passed through the shackles of time and space. His eyes trembled with reverence. Under the envelopment of the energy that fell from the sky, the little fellow in swaddling clothes, whose little chest had already stopped moving, suddenly trembled. It actually recovered some weak fluctuations. Then, it opened its mouth and spat out a mouthful of dark red blood. It actually began to cry loudly. Wah wah! The little fellow cried loudly. Although the cry was weak, it was like a great bell that resounded. On the peak of the mountain behind the Du family, Du Xiaofu's ears were filled with the sound of the great bell. Hot tears rolled down from his eyes. He clenched his fists, and his chest rose and fell violently. Du Xiaofu saw everything in the dream with his own eyes. His chest rose and fell, and his eyes became blurry. His heart was filled with sadness, bitterness, anger, and emotions. Du Tingxian walked over to Du Xiaofu and gently patted his son's shoulder. He did not say anything, and only suppressed his own emotions. His eyes were filled with tears and bitterness. Perhaps as a father, he did not want his son to see his powerless side. Father, that's my mother, right? Du Xiaofu raised his head and looked at his father. He had always suspected that what his father told him about his mother was fake. Yes. Du Tingxian nodded. I have an elder sister or younger sister. In that vivid dream, there was a baby girl. Du Xiaofu could clearly feel that the baby girl was connected to him by blood. Your younger sister was born 2 hours later than you. You are Xiaofu, and she is Xiaojing. Du Tingxian said. Finally, his eyes could not help but tremble, and then hot tears rolled down from his eyes. How strong are those people? Du Xiaofu looked at his father with red eyes and clenched fists. Du Tingxian raised his head and looked at the sky. Very, very strong. One day, I will overturn them. I want to see my mother and sister. Du Xiaofu clenched his fists, and his nails dug into his palms. Faint golden blood flowed from his palms. I want to, but they are very strong. Now that they have come to our door, I'm afraid they will continue to come. Are you afraid? Du Tingxian turned around and looked at his son. No, I will work hard to become stronger. If they come, I will kill them. I will kill them until I can see my mother and sister. Du Xiaofu said as hot tears began to flow down his cheeks. In that realistic dream, when he saw his mother's heart-wrenching cries and struggles, Du Xiaofu's heart ached. In the past, I brought you to stay in Stone City. But now, I want you to leave Stone City to train and become stronger. Du Tingxian said to his son, otherwise, the two of us will not be able to do anything to them. What about you? Are we going together? Du Xiaofu asked. I have my own place to go. I can't stay by your side anymore. In the Savage Beast Mountain Range, I have been following behind you. I know about the golden-winged rock and the purple-flamed demonic phoenix. But that beautiful woman is too strong. She has no intention of harming you. Instead, she is teaching you. So, I did not show up, but she must know that I am here. Du Tingxian looked at his son and said. As a father, he should be a mountain protecting his son. But he knew that he had more important things to do now. I am not the same as before. Du Xiaofu nodded. All these years, he knew that his drunkard father seemed to be muddle-headed, but in reality, he was like a mountain protecting him. You want to see your mother and sister. So, you have to become stronger. Du Tingxian looked at Du Xiaofu and smiled faintly. However, within that smile, there was a trace of sadness in his heart as he said, as for me, for the sake of my woman and daughter, it's time for me to step out. I suddenly feel that I am envious of myself. I am envious that I have a father like you. Du Xiaofu looked at his drunkard father. When he was young, he felt sad when he saw other people's children having a warm family. At this moment, Du Xiaofu knew that his father had swept away all the enemies for his wife and daughter. He was overbearing and fierce. As his son, he was proud of it. You are also not bad. I believe that you will not disappoint your mother and sister. Du Tingxian patted his son's shoulder and said, "What is an innate saint?" Du Xiaofu raised his head and asked, "Is my sister an innate saint?" An innate saint is the most terrifying talent in the world. Any one of them is enough to make the world tremble and all the races submit to them. Du Tingxian said. His gaze slightly trembled. Then, he looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "You have to work hard. Otherwise, when you see your sister, you will lose a lot of face. No matter how strong the little girl is, I am still her brother. Would she dare to hit me?" Du Xiaofu smiled. He was thinking about his twin sister, who he didn't know where she was at this moment. Would she look exactly like him? Would she not know that she had an older brother in this world? Du Tingxian didn't say anything else. The father and son quietly stood on the mountain peak and looked at the distant sky. At this moment, the father and son were very close. The father and son chatted for a long time. From his drunkard father, Du Xiaofu learned that after he survived the calamity, he returned to Stone City and grew up in the Du family. In fact, his drunkard father already knew that he had a trash martial vein. However, his uncles didn't know what happened to his drunkard father outside. It was said that his drunkard father had stayed in the Stone Dragon Empire. As for what he did in the Stone Dragon Empire, Du Xiaofu didn't hear about it. His drunkard father also didn't mention much about the empire. Little you, continue writing. Also, I would like to appeal to all the brothers who are reading the pirated version. Only by reading the original version can you support Little You's reading. If you have the conditions, please support the original version. At most, a few yuan a month, thank you in advance. Chapter 114. 3 days later, Du Xiaofu was meditating when he was called to the hall by his uncle. It turned out to be Yi Baolin, Yi Zijin, Bai Jiru, Bai Cai, and the others. Even Yi Guang and Bai Wei were among them. However, these two Meridian Spirit Realm cultivators were extremely courteous in front of Du Xiaofu. They didn't put on airs at all. What? You want me to be the city lord? When Du Xiaofu learned of their intentions, he was so shocked that his mouth formed a circle. He shook his head without any hesitation and said, "You should find someone else. I can't be the city lord." No matter how Yi Baolin and Yi Guang tried to persuade him, Du Xiaofu was not interested. In the end, when everyone knew that Du Xiaofu really didn't want to be the city lord, Yi Zijin thought of a way to let her father, Yi Baolin, continue to be the city lord of Stone City, but Du Xiaofu would be the vice city lord. Normally, he wouldn't have to do anything. It was hard to refuse, so Du Xiaofu had no choice but to nod and agree. Anyway, he didn't have to do anything, so it didn't matter if he had a title. Then, the three families discussed the matters in the city. Du Xiaofu could only stay on the side, bored. Knowing that everything in the city had been restored, Du Xiaofu was relieved. However, when he learned that the three families and other forces had lost no less than 2,000 people, he was secretly sad and grieved. After the Yi family and the Bai family left, Du Xiaofu mentioned to his uncles that he might leave Stone City to train. Unexpectedly, Du Jinwu and Du Zhixiong didn't object at all. Instead, they were extremely supportive. However, they told Du Xiaofu to be careful outside. "Xiaofu, your eldest sister is currently in the Stone Dragon Empire's Tianwu Academy. Your second brother is in the Lanling Prefecture. He seems to be working in a gang called the Star Dragon Gang. If you have the chance, you can go and see them. They haven't been home for several years," Du Zhixiong said to Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu nodded. His eldest sister was his eldest uncle's daughter, and his second brother was his second uncle's son. Du Xiaofu still remembered how his eldest sister and second brother took care of him. They didn't alienate him because of his reputation as a foolish young master. They even often warned Du Hao and the others that if they dared to bully him, they would break their legs. It was a pity that his eldest sister and second brother weren't home often. Thinking about his eldest sister and second brother, Du Xiaofu couldn't help but smile. At that time, the one that Du Hao and the others were most afraid of was not his second brother, but his eldest sister. Even his second brother was afraid of his eldest sister's fiery personality. The night was as cold as water. There was no moon or clouds tonight. Only the twinkling stars hung in the blue sky. When do you plan to leave Stone City? In the courtyard, Du Tingxian was still sitting on the rattan chair as he stared at the deep night sky. His gaze was even deeper than the stars in the night sky. In the next 2 days, Du Xiaofu sat on the edge of the rattan chair while holding the new jug of wine he bought for his alcoholic father last time. After drinking a mouthful of strong wine, his throat felt as if it was on fire. He secretly thought that his alcoholic father's wine was getting stronger and stronger. Let's go to the Lanling prefecture first, Du Tingxian said. Why should I go to the Lanling prefecture? Du Xiaofu handed the jug of wine to his alcoholic father. Second uncle said that his second brother was at the Lanling prefecture. Flowing Cloud Prefecture is the Lanling Prefecture's territory. Go find Prefecture Lord Ouyangling and tell him about Stone City. He will know what to do if he knows. Du Tingxian took the jug of wine from his son and said. Du Xiaofu knew that the destruction of the Flowing Cloud Prefecture's army in Stone City would be troublesome in the future. He raised his eyebrows and said, but I don't know the Mansion Lord of the Lanling Prefecture. I'm afraid that even the Mansion Lord of the Lanling Prefecture wouldn't be easy to meet. Du Tingxian took a sip of wine and said, I know him. Looking at his alcoholic father, Du Xiaofu didn't know what else to say. After you go to the Lanling Prefecture, go to the Stone Dragon Empire's Tianwu Academy and think of a way to join the Talisman Department. Du Tingxian said. What is the Talisman Department? Du Xiaofu asked. Tianwu Academy is divided into the Martial Department and the Talisman Department. The Talisman Department is a place to nurture spirit talisman masters. Du Tingxian said. Du Xiaofu looked at his alcoholic father with a puzzled expression and said, I thought you didn't like spirit talisman masters? Asking you to go to the Talisman Department doesn't mean that I like spirit talisman masters. Du Tingxian glanced at Du Xiaofu and said. I will consider the Talisman Department, but I will only consider it. Your son is going to cultivate spiritual power now. It's up to you whether you like it or not. Du Xiaofu stood up and entered his room to cultivate the mysterious incomplete cultivation technique. Du Tingxian didn't say anything. He smiled faintly and continued to look at the sky. After a long time, a sharp light surged in his eyes as he muttered, Do you really think that you are gods of this world? Even if you are gods, I will drag you down sooner or later. The next day, in Fuibai's room in the martial repository. Just as Du Xiaofu was about to bid farewell to Fuibai, he didn't expect to see Fuibai wrapping up the 2 patched clothes he often wore and a bunch of other things. Old Bai, what are you doing? Du Xiaofu asked in puzzlement. I'm going to leave the Du family. Fuibai said, but his expression was somewhat depressed. When Du Xiaofu heard this and saw Fuibai's depressed expression, he immediately asked, Old Bai, did you encounter some difficulties? Do you need my help? Fuibai raised his head to look at Du Xiaofu and said angrily, I told Du Jinwu that I have been in the Du family for too long, so I want to leave the Du family to play outside. However, that kid actually said that I'm old and didn't let me leave. Hearing Fuibai's words, Du Xiaofu's face immediately stiffened. From Fuibai's words, it wasn't difficult for Du Xiaofu to know that his uncle must be worried that Fuibai was old and had no children. If he left the Du family, what would happen if he encountered danger? However, he didn't expect Fuibai to be so ungrateful. Could it be that you also don't want me to leave and want me to work for your Du family for the rest of my life? Fuibai said to Du Xiaofu. Where do you plan to go? Du Xiaofu glanced at Fuibai and asked. I don't know, I want to walk around. I'll go wherever is fun, hee hee. Fu Bai wrapped his bag in a few moves. When he saw that Du Xiaofu had no intention of stopping him, he immediately smiled at Du Xiaofu with an old face. It's very dangerous outside. It's not bad for you to stay in the Du family. If you want to play, the stone city isn't small. Du Xiaofu helplessly looked at Fu Bai and said, I'm already tired of staying in the stone city. What's so fun about it? Fu Bai rolled his eyes and squeezed out a smile on his wrinkled face. He looked extremely cunning and said, how about this? Let's call off our previous bet. If you agree, I'll consider staying. A bet is a bet. I'll always be your big brother. Goodbye, I won't send you off. Du Xiaofu glared at Fu Bai. So this guy was just trying to stir up emotions. He was actually thinking about calling off the previous bet. He immediately turned around and left. Little brat. Fu Bai fiercely glared at Du Xiaofu's back. Then, as if he thought of something, he curled his lips and revealed his yellowed teeth. He softly muttered, I'll never see this little brat again in this lifetime. This way, no one will know that I lost the bet. Yes, just like that. I'm too smart. A bright smile appeared on his wrinkled face. Fu Bai immediately picked up his bag and left the room. The next day, on the stone city walls, the king's scaled demon tiger transformed into a few meters and stood beside Du Xiaofu. Yi Zijin looked at Du Xiaofu and said, be careful. If Senior Thunder Demon Lion comes out of seclusion, please tell him on my behalf that I won't be able to say goodbye to him. Du Xiaofu said. Last time, Leizu's seclusion was affected, and he was even injured. This time, I'm afraid that he will be in seclusion for a longer period of time. However, when Leizu comes out, I will tell him. Yi Zijin said. There's no need to be outside. Be careful. Du Jinwu said with concern in his eyes. Du Xiaofu nodded and immediately said goodbye to Yi Baolin, Bai Cai, Bai Jiru, and second uncle who came to send him off. Roar! A moment later, Du Xiaofu rode on the king's scaled demon tiger. Following the roar of the king's scaled demon tiger, Du Xiaofu soared into the sky and gradually disappeared from everyone's sight. Looking at the figure that was getting farther and farther away, Yi Zijin raised the curtain and frowned. That figure was getting farther and farther away, as if the distance between them was getting farther and farther. Does he really not belong to the stone city? Yi Zijin said in her heart. Not long ago, Yi Guang had mentioned to her that that young man did not belong to the stone city. Therefore, it was destined that the two of them would get farther and farther away. Zijin, let's go back. After a long time, everyone came down from the city wall. Yi Baolin looked at his beloved daughter who was still standing on the city wall. On his handsome face, there was a trace of helplessness and a wry smile. Father, I also want to go outside. Yi Zijin turned around and looked at her father. She gently shook her head, causing half of her hair to flutter. She raised her hand and combed it. Why? Yi Baolin looked at his beloved daughter and asked. The stone city is too small. It will be more exciting outside. Yi Zijin said. Yi Baolin did not immediately answer. Instead, a bitter smile appeared on his face. A grown girl cannot be kept at home. Sigh, Yi Zijin opened her mouth, wanting to say something. She looked in the direction where someone had just disappeared, but she lowered her head again and remained silent. Lonling Prefecture, one of the 365 prefectures of the Stone Dragon Empire. Under each prefecture, there were hundreds of prefectures. Under each prefecture, there were dozens of cities. A prefecture was extremely large and had a large population. It was rumored that the 365 prefectures of the empire were extremely powerful. Each of them was equivalent to a feudal lord of a region. They occupied a region and had a high status. The first volume of The Storm of the Stone City has ended. The new volume, The Fledgling, has begun. Today, brothers, have you donated your flowers, recommendations, and coffee? Chapter 115. The Lanling Prefecture was supposed to refer to the area of the entire Lanling Prefecture. The hundreds of prefectures under the Lanling Prefecture could all be called the Lanling Prefecture's territory. However, under normal circumstances, the Lanling Prefecture that people referred to was the Lanling Prefecture located in the Lanling city, where the prefecture master resided. The Lanling city was one of the prefectures of the Lanling Prefecture and was also the central area of the hundreds of prefectures in the Lanling Prefecture. It was the economic and transportation hub of the Lanling Prefecture. The Lanling city was more than 10 times larger than an ordinary city and had a large population. Because the Lanling Prefecture was located in the Lanling city, it was also called the Lanling Prefecture City. It was rumored that the Lanling city was filled with experts and crouching tigers. With the king-scaled demonic tiger around, it was naturally convenient for Du Xiaofu to go to the Lanling Prefecture. After understanding the direction of the Lanling Prefecture, excluding the time to rest at night, it would probably take 2 days to reach the Lanling Prefecture. However, with the king-scaled demonic tiger around, Du Xiaofu had some misgivings. According to his drunkard father, having the king-scaled demonic tiger around wasn't necessarily a good thing. After all, the outside world was the human world. With the king-scaled demonic tiger's mediocre pulse spirit realm cultivation, it was definitely a prey that many people wanted. The king-scaled demonic tiger's bones and essence blood were also priceless. Therefore, along the way, Du Xiaofu didn't dare to be too ostentatious. However, it opened his eyes a lot. He expected to reach the Lanling Prefecture in 2 days, but in reality, Du Xiaofu only arrived 3 days later. On the first night, when he was spending the night in a small town in the mountains, he encountered a shady inn. The shady inn originally thought that Du Xiaofu was young and generous, so he would definitely be a fat sheep. However, he didn't expect him to be a jinx. With the king-scaled demonic tiger around, the result was obvious. The shady inn was directly torn apart by the king-scaled demonic tiger. Everything valuable that could be taken away from the inn naturally fell into Du Xiaofu's Qiankuan bag. The next night Du Xiaofu was much more careful. He spent the night in a quiet valley. With the deterrence of the king-scaled demonic tiger, ordinary demonic beasts did not dare to come close. The red sun had just risen, and the mountains were continuous. Each peak was ink blue in color. Soon after, mist rose, and milky white gauze separated the mountains, leaving only the green peaks. It was like a refreshing, dense, and exquisite landscape painting. It was too beautiful to take in all at once. Amidst the mountains, the field of vision in front of him suddenly became vast and boundless. The endless buildings were tall and short, and they were orderly. They formed a building complex that was as vast as the sea. It was majestic and magnificent, causing people to exclaim in admiration. The continuous and tall city walls were about 10 zhang tall and were built with several layers of huge rocks that weighed several thousand jin. It made people feel oppressed when they stood under the city walls. It was likely that even a perfect pulse spirit stage practitioner would find it difficult to destroy such a thick wall. From all directions, there were many groups of people entering the city one after another. Many of them were riding demonic beast mounts, and they had an extraordinary aura. They should be caravans from various places. With the large population and large area of the Lanling Prefecture city, the amount of goods and various consumables entering and leaving the city every day was definitely a shocking number. Du Xiaofu was standing under the city walls. Behind him was the king-scaled demonic tiger that had shrunk its body to the size of a night cat. His gaze fell on the 4 large golden words on the city walls. Lanling Prefecture City. Du Xiaofu raised his head and looked at the 4 large words that could be seen from afar. It was as if he was saying to the king-scaled demonic tiger beside him, "We're here." Stepping forward, Du Xiaofu and the king-scaled demonic tiger entered the city along with the caravans entering the city. As soon as they entered the city, Du Xiaofu felt what it meant to be bustling. In the bustling Lanling Prefecture city, the streets were bustling with people. From time to time, the clamor of hawking could be heard. This was only in the morning, and it was enough to show how bustling the Lanling Prefecture city was. The king's scaled demonic tiger followed Du Xiaofu as they strolled along the bustling streets, and it immediately attracted a lot of attention. In the Lanling prefecture city, there were definitely many young masters who kept demonic beasts as pets. Those top playboys even had some decent demonic beasts. However, Du Xiaofu had a stray cat following behind him, so he had no choice but to pay more attention to him. It was his first time in such a huge city like the Lanling prefecture city. After all, Du Xiaofu was not even 17 years old. His interest was piqued, and he even bought a lot of things as he strolled around. The Lanling prefecture city was astonishingly prosperous. There were all kinds of shops, and there was a dazzling array of goods. Naturally, there were also many shops that sold martial cultivation items. There were elixirs, martial skills, weapons, and so on. After Du Xiaofu went in to take a look, he was shocked. This was not something the Stone City could compare to. There were even profound-level cultivation techniques and spiritual elixirs for sale. However, the prices made Du Xiaofu flabbergasted, and he immediately stopped. Late in the morning, there was a sudden commotion on the bustling streets. "Little girl, how can this broken thing of yours be worth 1,000 cultivation coins? It's not a martial skill, nor is it an elixir. You're clearly scamming people." Quite a number of people had gathered at the corner of the bustling street. A young man dressed in luxurious clothes was holding a palm-sized object in his hand with his sleeves rolled up. His eyes, however, were looking at a young girl of 14 or 15 years old with malicious intent. Although the girl was young, her body was already curvy. In addition to her delicate and pretty face, she would definitely become slim and elegant in 2 years' time. "This is my ancestral item. It's said that this item is very special. If it wasn't for my aunt being seriously injured and needing treatment, I wouldn't have sold this ancestral item." The girl seemed to feel that the young man in luxurious clothes had no intention of buying it. She immediately snatched the palm-sized item from the young man's hand with a nervous expression. The gaze of the young man in luxurious clothes made the girl feel extremely uncomfortable, and she felt afraid for no reason. "If this item is extraordinary, why would you be willing to sell it? Little girl, do you know what 1,000 cultivation coins represent? It means that I can buy a low yellow level martial skill. 1,000 cultivation coins is more or less enough to go to the Happy Red brothel and find a courtesan." Ugh. The well-dressed young man laughed heartily. He looked at the young girl with an evil smile and said, "I'm not interested in this broken thing. Why don't you follow this young master? In the future, you'll serve this young master as a personal maid. If you serve this young master comfortably, I'll give you 1,000 cultivation coins today. How about it? You look pretty good. If you wait for another 2 years, haha." As the young man in luxurious clothes spoke, his gaze became more and more filthy. This girl is not bad. She's a good virgin. It's a pity that young Master Gua made the first move. I'm so envious." The surrounding young men in luxurious clothes immediately echoed. Many burly men in guard attire stood at the side with obscene smiles on their faces. Although there were many onlookers in the surroundings, no one stepped forward to stop the young men in luxurious clothes. In fact, they even revealed fear in their eyes. Some of the onlookers in the crowd also pulled their female companions behind them. There were even some people who saw the young men in front and immediately pulled their female companions away in a hurry. Some of the female companions saw the young men in luxurious clothes and immediately turned pale. They turned their heads and left, afraid that they would be seen by the young men in luxurious clothes. "It's Gua Kun of Lanlings for young masters again." "What Lanlings for young masters? They're clearly the 4 scourges of Lanling." "Lower your voice. Don't let Gua Kun hear you. Otherwise, you'll be in trouble." What a pity for that girl. Why did she have to meet that scum Gua Kun? Many people in the crowd lowered their voices as they were afraid that the young men in luxurious clothes would hear them. However, the gazes in their eyes were filled with disdain toward the young men in luxurious clothes. "I'm not selling this ancestral item." The young woman was a bit scared. She immediately turned around and wanted to leave. She could tell that the young men in luxurious clothes were not good people. "Little girl, don't leave yet. Come with me. How about 2,000 profound coins?" The young man in the middle immediately blocked the young woman's path and did not allow her to leave. "No, I'm going back." The young woman was afraid. Tears were about to overflow from her innocent eyes. "Then I'll send you back, okay?" The young man in luxurious clothes was unwilling to let her go. He evilly smiled and grabbed the young woman's shoulder. "Sigh, this bastard. He's bringing disaster to the Lanling Prefecture city." When the surrounding crowd saw that, no one dared to interfere. Several cultivators with decent strength had furious gazes. However, in the end, they could only watch with folded arms. They did not dare to step forward. Seeing that the hand of the young man in luxurious clothes was about to grab the young woman's shoulder, the young woman wanted to back away. However, she panicked and didn't know what to do. Tears were already overflowing from her eyes. She looked very pitiful and pitiful. Snatching a young woman in broad daylight. "Do you even have any shame?" His indifferent voice sounded. There was even a bit of immaturity in his voice. "Chi." However, just at that moment, a purple-clothed young man suddenly appeared beside the panicking young woman. He waved his hand and with a shake of his wrist, he grabbed the wrist of the young man in luxurious clothes. An invisible power suppressed the young man in luxurious clothes' hand. It actually pressed down the young man's hand a bit and he was unable to move it forward in the slightest. "Who is that boy?" He actually dared to provoke Guokun. He doesn't seem to be a disciple from some big family in the Lanling Prefecture city. If that boy doesn't have some background, then he's an idiot. At that instant, everyone's gazes were astonished. All of them were astonished as they looked at the purple-clothed young man. The young man in luxurious clothes also looked at the purple-clothed young man in astonishment. Then, he saw that the purple-clothed young man was 16 or 17 years old. Furthermore, it was an unfamiliar face. He was slightly stunned. Then, with a smile that was not a smile, he asked, "Boy, are you from the Lanling Prefecture city?" "No." The purple-clothed young man shook his head. "Little you, continue to write. There's more. Continue to work hard." Chapter 116. Then congratulations, you don't have to implicate your clan. The youth in luxurious clothes had a faint smile on his face. His gaze instantly turned gloomy. With a flick of his wrist, a powerful aura surged around his body. He had actually reached the mysterious pulse stage. Judging from the youth's age, he was definitely extremely talented to be able to reach the mysterious pulse stage. An extremely powerful aura surged out from the youth in luxurious clothes. He directly broke free from the purple-robed youth's grip and clenched his hand into a fist. In an instant, he threw a punch at the purple-robed youth. His attack was clean and efficient. It was extremely extraordinary. "You definitely don't have that ability." The purple-robed youth's gaze turned gloomy. The arm that was flicked away by the youth in luxurious clothes shook and a faint golden cyclone suddenly surged on his arm. There seemed to be mysterious symbols surging within. Oscillating fist. Just as the former's punch was thrown out, the purple-robed youth raised his hand and clenched his 5 fingers into a fist. His fist directly punched out and an astonishing aura erupted. Bang! In an instant, the 2 fists fiercely collided and a low muffled sound rang out. Walala! Immediately, everyone saw that within the purple-robed youth's fist, there were astonishing 13 layers of energy waves that overlapped each other. Like a shockwave, they fiercely struck the youth's fist. Crack! The sound of the fist's bones breaking rang out. Under the astonished gazes of the surrounding people, the youth in luxurious clothes' right arm powerlessly drooped down and a miserable shriek came from his mouth. Ah! The shriek was accompanied by the sound of bones breaking as the youth in luxurious clothes was violently sent flying. In the end, he fell on his butt on the street and spat out blood from his mouth. In one move, the youth in luxurious clothes was heavily injured. That youth is so strong. He's not just strong. No wonder he dares to stop Guokun. I wonder where this youth came from. If he doesn't have a strong background, he's probably dead. The surrounding onlookers looked at each other with astonishment. Although Guokun was young, he had already reached the mysterious level of the pulsation realm. In the entire Lanling Prefecture city, his strength and cultivation were considered to be quite good. Who would have thought that he would be severely injured by the purple-robed young man in one move? How dare you touch young Gua? Destroy this kid. After being stunned for a while, someone suddenly shouted loudly. Although the expressions of the guards behind these young men darkened, they immediately pounced forward like wolves and tigers. With extremely powerful auras, they immediately pounced towards the purple-robed young man. Bang bang bang! A deep sonic boom resounded. At the same time, the onlookers on the surrounding streets saw one figure after another being sent flying in a parabola. Of the dozen or so men, many of them were at the initial pulse realm. 2 of them were at the profound pulse realm, but they had no power to resist. Bang bang bang! One by one, the burly men were smashed to the ground, spurting blood from their mouths. Their bones and tendons were broken, and it was difficult for them to get up. The few youths who were originally clustered behind the first finely dressed young man did not dare to make a move when they saw this scene. They involuntarily took a few steps back and hurriedly ran to the side of the first finely dressed young man who was sent flying by Du Xiaofu's fist. Kid, you dare to attack us? If you have the guts, tell us your name. When the youths saw that Guokun and so many guards could not even withstand a single blow from the purple-robed youth, they were afraid that they would not be able to stand up to him. Fear surged in their eyes as they looked at the purple-robed youth. This kid was actually so terrifying. Du Xiaofu. The purple-robed youth's eyes moved slightly. He then turned around to look at the frightened young lady with a puzzled expression. He frowned and said softly, "Why didn't you attack? They might not be able to do anything to you." The purple-robed youth was Du Xiaofu. As soon as he came out, he saw someone trying to snatch a young lady. Naturally, he could not stand it. He could also tell that these few youths had some background in the Lanling Palace city. However, it didn't matter if he left his name. After all, he was not from the Lanling Palace city. After meeting the Lanling Palace city's palace master, he could just leave and there would be no need for him to get entangled with these few silk pants. The young lady regained her senses. Like a frightened kitten, her bright eyes looked at Du Xiaofu as if she was about to cry. She looked very pitiful and said timidly, "I'm too nervous. Once I'm nervous, I don't know what to do." "It's fine. You should go back," Du Xiaofu said to the young lady. "You should be a good person. Can you do me a favor and lend me 1,000 cultivation coins? I want to buy some elixirs for my aunt." The young lady raised her head and looked at Du Xiaofu. Her eyes were as pure as a piece of white paper. Looking at the young lady's pure eyes, Du Xiaofu's heart was moved. He could not help but think of his sister that he had never seen before. "How about this? Bring me to see your aunt. Maybe I will have a way." After hesitating for a moment, Du Xiaofu said softly, "Really? Thank you so much. My name is Xingyu, Dai Xingyu." The young lady's clear eyes were filled with joy. "My name is Du Xiaofu." Du Xiaofu said. "I just heard it." Dai Xingyu said happily. Her slender body slightly straightened, and her youthful and seductive curves became even more graceful. The two of them then disappeared into the crowd. The young men in luxurious clothes looked embarrassed, but they did not dare to stop them. "Young Master Gua, what do we do now?" A young man in luxurious clothes looked at the young man whose arm was injured by Du Xiaofu and asked weakly. "Slap!" Just as the young man finished speaking, he was immediately slapped hard by the young man's left hand. A red palm print was imprinted on his cheek, and a burning pain climbed up his cheek. "Remember, the next time I get beaten up, if you don't get beaten up, don't follow me in the future." The young man looked coldly at the other young men beside him and said, "I'll give you a chance to find where that brat is staying. If you can't find him by tomorrow morning at the latest, you will bear the consequences. After following Dai Xingyu for a full 2 hours, Du Xiaofu finally saw the ant that Dai Xingyu had mentioned in a remote old house in the city. On the bed was a woman who had already fainted. Her face was pale, but it did not affect her extremely beautiful face at all. This unconscious woman looked to be about 21 or 22 years old. She was wearing a long dress. Perhaps because she was lying on the bed, her clothes were tightly clung to her body, revealing her excellent figure. The curves of her body were alluring, and her breasts were high and bulging. Brother Xiaofu. Dai Xingyu acted as if they were close friends. She anxiously looked at the woman on the bed, and was so anxious that tears were about to flow out. She said, "I've checked, but I don't know what happened to my aunt. Hurry and save her." "Is she really your aunt?" Du Xiaofu was puzzled. Judging from her age, that woman did not seem to be Dai Xingyu's aunt. Dai Xingyu nodded seriously. Her clear and bright eyes looked at Du Xiaofu, as if she was afraid that Du Xiaofu did not believe her. She said, "My aunt is much younger than my mother, so she is not much older than me. But she really is my aunt." Du Xiaofu did not reply to Dai Xingyu, and had already walked in front of the woman on the bed. Looking at that gorgeous and beautiful face, Du Xiaofu could not help but look at that beautiful curve. In his heart, he thought, Dai Xingyu is really as pure as a piece of white paper. She brought home just anyone. Such a beautiful aunt is still unconscious on the bed. If the person who brought her home was someone with evil intentions, the consequences would be unimaginable. This thought disappeared in the blink of an eye. Then, the expression on Du Xiaofu's face turned serious. He condensed a seal with his hand, and a charm rune light spread out from his palm. Then, it shrouded the beautiful woman on the bed. As Du Xiaofu made his move, Dai Xingyu also tugged at the corner of her clothes. She tightly bit her tender red lips, and her clear and bright eyes were filled with worry. "Chi!" Du Xiaofu withdrew his hand seal, and the rune on his palm disappeared. His expression became serious. "Brother Xiaofu, how is my aunt?" Dai Xingyu looked at Du Xiaofu's serious expression, and she became even more nervous. "You are also a soul symbol master, can't you tell?" Du Xiaofu looked at Dai Xingyu in confusion. From the faintly discernible aura fluctuating from Dai Xingyu's body, Du Xiaofu could feel that Dai Xingyu was actually a 2-star soul symbol master, and a perfect 2-star soul symbol master at that. Ever since he cultivated the incomplete cultivation method in the beast bone, Du Xiaofu discovered that he could easily detect the cultivation of others. As long as the cultivation of others was not too strong, even if they hid their cultivation, it would be difficult for him to not detect it. Therefore, Du Xiaofu was also very puzzled. As a perfect 2-star soul symbol master, although Dai Xingyu might not be able to deal with those hedonistic hooligans, it should not be a problem for her to escape. However, he did not expect Dai Xingyu, this little girl, to be so nervous that she did not know what to do. Hearing Du Xiaofu's words, Dai Xingyu looked at Du Xiaofu and blushed. She said, "Brother Xiaofu, although I am a soul symbol master, I only have cultivation. I don't know how to heal at all, and no one has taught me." As she spoke, Dai Xingyu seemed to have thought of something. She said, "However, I know how to set up a symbol array, but as long as I am nervous, I can't set it up." Du Xiaofu looked at the naive girl speechlessly and frowned. He said, "Your aunt should have been poisoned. The poison is very strong, so I'm afraid that the medicine you wanted to buy to heal your aunt will not have any effect." "Poisoned?" Dai Xingyu heard this and suddenly became nervous. She was so anxious that she was about to cry again. She pulled on Du Xiaofu's clothes and said, "Brother Xiaofu, you must have a way, right? Please save my aunt." 6 Watch, there is more. Xiao Yu, continue to write. Chapter 117. This poison isn't fatal, but a hallucinatory poison. The poisoned person will have hallucinations, and finally lose consciousness. Du Xiaofu had learned a lot from Zhen Qingchun. Although this hallucinatory poison was very powerful, it wasn't a problem for him. It was just a little troublesome. Just now, during the inspection, Du Xiaofu learned that the beautiful unconscious woman was also a martial artist. Her cultivation level wasn't weak, and she had already reached the initial stage of the pulsating realm. In terms of cultivation, he wasn't as strong as her. Hallucinatory poison, what should we do? Dai Xingyu seemed to have also heard about hallucinatory poisons. Her worried eyes, which were on the verge of tears, relaxed, but she was still extremely nervous. I want to concoct some antidotes. It shouldn't be a big problem. Du Xiaofu nodded, and said to Dai Xingyu, I want to find a quiet room to concoct the antidotes. Help me guard the door, and don't disturb me. Are you still a spiritual symbol master? Dai Xingyu looked at Du Xiaofu strangely. She seemed extremely puzzled, and asked, I thought you were a martial artist, and those bad guys were no match for you. Du Xiaofu didn't answer Dai Xingyu, and only faintly smiled. Secretly, he naturally hinted the king-scaled monstrous tiger to guard him while he was concocting the antidote. The old house was simple, elegant, and extremely large. It could be seen that it used to be the residence of a rich family, but now it was extremely empty. According to Dai Xingyu, only she and her aunt lived in this old house. In a room that should have been empty for a long time, it was extremely clean. Du Xiaofu had Dai Xingyu and the king-scaled monstrous tiger guard the door, while he sat cross-legged in the room. His hand seals condensed, and a spiritual stove and symbol cauldron condensed in front of him. Hallucinatory poisons are all similar, and the antidote methods are almost the same. One blood-purging grass, one mind-calming fruit. After finding the materials needed to concoct the antidote, Du Xiaofu immediately started to concoct it. The runes of the 5 elements inside the spiritual stove symbol cauldron fluctuated, and a blazing aura was immediately released. Outside the door, Dai Xingyu also felt an extremely hot aura coming from within the room. Her eyes were filled with nervousness as her gaze landed on the kitten-sized king-scaled demon tiger squatting outside the room. She said, why would Xiaofu Gij bring a kitten with him? I often hear those adults say that men don't keep cats and women don't keep dogs. The king-scaled demon tiger immediately raised its head to glare at Dai Xingyu, saying to itself, you are a cat, I am a tiger, a different king-scaled demon tiger. Dai Xingyu seemed to be getting more and more interested in the king-scaled demonic tiger. She circled around the king-scaled demonic tiger, then squatted down beside it and hugged it in her arms. She stroked the tiny scales on the king-scaled demonic tiger's body and softly said, your little kitten is also very special. Brother Xiaofu seems to call you little tiger, but I feel that the name little tiger doesn't suit you. The scales on your body are circular, how about little circle from now on? Roar, the king-scaled demon tiger angrily glared at Dai Xingyu, letting out a low growl from its throat. However, this growl really sounded a bit like a cat's meow. Seeing the response of the kitten in her bosom, Dai Xingyu immediately smiled happily, saying, you agree? Then you will be called Little Circle from now on. The king-scaled demon tiger collapsed. It was a different king-scaled demon tiger, who the hell wanted to be called Little Circle? It seems like you really liked the name Lil Circle. I like it too. It's a nice name, isn't it? Lil Circle. Dai Xingyu praised himself as he hugged the king-scaled demonic tiger. The pitiful king-scaled demon tiger was so obediently held in Dai Xingyu's arms, not daring to reveal its true identity. Time slowly passed. In the room, Du Xiaofu was refining medicine by himself. Only now did he realize that refining medicine was not an easy task. Without Jin Qingchun by his side, he felt a little uncertain. However, during the refining process, Du Xiaofu didn't make any mistakes. This detoxification liquid wasn't some high-grade product, and actually wasn't too difficult. With his current cultivation as a 3-star talisman master, refining it was much easier. Using his mental energy to sense the changes inside the cauldron, including the temperature, the spiritual liquid, the medicinal ingredients, and so on, Du Xiaofu didn't dare to relax even for the slightest change. If he made the slightest mistake, it could affect the success of the final medicinal liquid. After persevering for several hours, Du Xiaofu finally reached the final step. His mental energy controlled the fusion of the various elixir's medicinal liquids, and then refined and fused them at high temperatures, gradually fusing them into a new type of medicinal liquid. This was also the most difficult step, but Du Xiaofu completed it extremely well. Even if Xin Qingchun was watching at this moment, she would probably secretly curse him for being abnormal. When the final medicinal liquid was completed, Du Xiaofu put away the cauldron, and the medicinal liquid was immediately collected into a jade bottle that he had prepared beforehand. Last night, at the final step, Du Xiaofu put away the cauldron and took a deep breath. Although this detoxification liquid wasn't difficult to refine, it consumed a lot of energy, and at this moment, his face looked somewhat pale. Creak, when Du Xiaofu opened the door, it was already late at night, and Dai Xingyu had been waiting at the door all along. When the king-scaled demon tiger in Dai Xingyu's arms saw Du Xiaofu, it immediately revealed an aggrieved expression. It was simply annoyed to death by this little girl's constant mutterings, and its ears were already full of calluses, but it still couldn't stop. Returning to the original room, Du Xiaofu's left hand gently pinched the closed lips of that beautiful girl, opening them. Immediately, those slightly upturned lips were indescribably alluring, as if they were inviting him to kiss them. Du Xiaofu's will was firm, and he slowly poured the detoxification liquid from the jade bottle into the beautiful girl's upturned mouth. "Brother Xiaofu, why hasn't Aunt woken up yet?" Dai Xingyu nervously asked, still tightly holding the king-scaled demon tiger in her bosom. Du Xiaofu once again examined that beautiful girl, and then said, "She's already fine, but I'm afraid that it will take some time for her to wake up. However, your aunt still has some old ailments, so I'll be a good person to the end, and help treat them together." "Many thanks, Brother Xiaofu, you are really a good person. Aunt often says that no man is good, but Brother Xiaofu is definitely a good person." Dai Xingyu happily said, but immediately felt that she had said something wrong, and immediately said, "No, I was wrong, Brother Xiaofu is not a good person, that's not right, Brother Xiaofu, I didn't mean it that way." Dai Xingyu was so anxious that she was about to cry. She didn't know what to say. It seemed that no matter what she said, it was not the meaning she wanted to express. Du Xiaofu's expression was very helpless. He waved his hand and said to Dai Xingyu, "Okay, I know what you mean. You and the little tiger go guard outside, I'll help treat your aunt." "Okay." Dai Xingyu nodded, and then said to Du Xiaofu, "Brother Xiaofu, this kitten's name is Little Tiger, it doesn't sound good, so I've already changed its name to Little Circle, what do you think?" "Little Circle?" Du Xiaofu was surprised, and then looked at the king-scaled demon tiger with a smile, and said, "It sounds good, let's call it Little Circle." Roar! The king-scaled demon tiger growled in a low voice, and its eyes protested, but it seemed to have no effect. Then, it was carried out of the room by Dai Xingyu, leaving Du Xiaofu and the unconscious beautiful woman in the room. If the beautiful woman was still conscious at this time, she would have ruthlessly slapped Dai Xingyu's butt. This little girl actually left her alone in a room with a strange man, and she was unconscious. One had to know that in the entire Lanling Prefecture city, there were countless young talents, rich businessmen, and celebrities who had fantasized about her, and couldn't wait to go bankrupt just to get close to her. "She's really quite beautiful." Du Xiaofu looked at the unconscious woman on the bed, and at this time, carefully looked at her. The more he looked, the more exquisite and beautiful he felt. Compared to Yi Zijin, Baicai, and the others, although Yi Zijin and Baicai were also very beautiful, this woman had a temperament and taste, and compared to Yi Zijin and Baicai, she was more attractive to men. Du Xiaofu felt that he should be a gentleman. This woman was still unconscious, and he shouldn't have any thoughts about her. Moreover, Du Xiaofu felt that he was still young, and he should be wholeheartedly focused on cultivation. Therefore, Du Xiaofu purely felt that this woman was very beautiful, and then began to heal her. In Du Xiaofu's 2 inspections, he found that there were some old injuries under the beautiful woman's abdomen. It should have been there for a long time, and these old injuries even affected her cultivation, making it difficult for her to break through. Du Xiaofu's intuition told him that these injuries had affected this woman for at least 3 years, and she hadn't broken through. This woman was at most 21 or 22 years old, and 3 years ago, she had already reached the initial level of the pulsating realm. For her to reach the initial level of the pulsating realm at the age of 18 or 19, this girl's talent was absolutely terrifying. However, at this time, healing her made it difficult for Du Xiaofu. It was inevitable that he would touch this woman's body. Moreover, her injuries were near the pulsating realm, and the pulsating realm was under her abdomen. Although there was a layer of clothing between them, it still seemed a little charming. I'm saving people. She's Dai Xingyu's aunt, so she's an elder. Du Xiaofu murmured softly, and then a smile appeared on his face. Hand seals formed, and he began to heal the woman. Hand seals formed one after another, flashing with runes. Then, his palm was tightly pressed against the beautiful woman's abdomen. And, although the beautiful woman was still unconscious, she let out a soft moan from her throat. Her delicate body trembled, and her voice tugged at people's heartstrings. Brothers, today's update is over. There will be an update tomorrow. N. Chapter 118. When dawn was about to break, Du Xiaofu's fingerprints moved across the woman's delicate body. Phew! Exhaling a long breath, Du Xiaofu's face was pale. This had consumed a lot of energy. Treating the old illness around the woman's divine watchtower was much more difficult than Du Xiaofu had imagined. Within the old illness, there was a cold aura that could not be dispersed. The cold aura could not be dispersed no matter how one tried to dispel it. It also had a corrosive effect on profound energy and was extremely insidious. Originally, Du Xiaofu was a little puzzled as to why the woman's injuries had not healed after 3 years. Those injuries did not seem serious and could be treated by a 3-star spirit talisman master who was proficient in alchemy. She could even use her own breathing to recover. At this moment, Du Xiaofu knew the reason. Ordinary spirit talisman masters could not do anything about the cold aura, let alone him. However, Du Xiaofu was practicing the cultivation method of the golden-winged great rocks. This cultivation method was extremely young and tough, and was the natural nemesis of the cold aura. This was why Du Xiaofu happened to be able to uproot the old illness in the woman's body. It's done. Du Xiaofu looked at the woman who seemed to still be unconscious. She should be waking up soon, unless his antidote was useless. With a smile on his face, he finally left the woman's room. Creak, when the door to the room opened and closed with a creak, the unconscious woman on the bed suddenly opened her eyes. Her long eyelashes fluttered and her eyes were like limpid autumn waters, moving one's heart and soul. Who is this person? He can actually treat the old illness in my body. However, he is quite honest and did not move around. Could it be that I am not charming enough? Looking at his back, he seems to be a youth, the woman muttered softly, a slight blush creeping onto her pale cheeks. In fact, she had already been awake for an hour. When she first woke up, she felt a man's hand moving around her delicate body. She was so scared that her heart trembled. She thought that she had finally fallen into the hands of those bastards. However, he immediately felt a wave of yang profound energy enter his body from the spirit gate. It was obvious that it was healing his injuries. That pair of man's hands gently moved around her body, but they were well behaved. They did not have any improper thoughts, nor did they take the opportunity to approach places that they should not approach. However, she was a woman after all. Although she could be considered to be in a brothel, no man had ever been able to get so close to her. As she thought about the man's hands roaming around her body, she could feel warmth flowing through her body wherever they passed. It was as if there was a warm current flowing through her body, especially under her lower abdomen. But, when she thought of this, she felt a strange feeling in her heart. Brother Xiaofu, how's my aunt? Seeing Du Xiaofu come out, Dai Xingyu's clear eyes were fixed on him, full of expectation. She should be fine. She'll wake up in at most 2 to 4 hours. I'll go back and do some breathing exercises first, Du Xiaofu said to Dai Xingyu. Okay, I'll send Brother Xiaofu to his room, Dai Xingyu said happily. Dai Xingyu said happily. Hearing that her aunt was fine, she felt relieved and smiled happily. No need, I know the way. You should rest early too, Du Xiaofu said, completely ignoring the fact that he was still a guest here. Roar! The king-scaled demonic tiger finally found an opportunity. It struggled out of Dai Xingyu's embrace and immediately followed Du Xiaofu. It did not want to be ravaged by that girl Dai Xingyu anymore. Okay, thank you, Brother Xiaofu, Dai Xingyu said happily. Dai Xingyu said happily. She wanted to go and see her aunt, but she was afraid that she would disturb her aunt's recovery, so she skipped back to her room. Night covered the sky, and the vast Lanling Prefecture city was completely shrouded in darkness. The stars in the sky were faintly bright. Wu Xiao, we found the place where that brat is staying. In a luxurious courtyard, a young man with a palm print on his face respectfully said to a young man who was lying in the arms of a woman enjoying a massage, I sent out many of my father's men, and we finally found the place where that brat is staying. The young man's face was pale. He was originally lying in the arms of a charming woman, and his eyes were slightly closed as he enjoyed the massage. Hearing this, he immediately opened his eyes, and a cold light flashed as he asked, Did you find out where that brat came from? Not yet, it's an old house. He should still be with that girl from the day, the young man immediately replied. Humph, no matter who it is, if I don't get my revenge, then I, Guokun, won't be able to appear in Lanling Prefecture City in the future. Guokun's face was gloomy, and a cold aura gushed out. It scared the charming woman behind him, and her eyes were filled with fear. It was as if she was afraid of offending someone she could not afford to offend. The young man with the palm print on his face hesitated for a moment, then he gathered his courage and said, Guo Xiao, that brat's strength seems to be extraordinary. Why don't we ask my father for help? Trash, oomph. Guo Kun glared at the young man, then coldly snorted and said, Just a brat, and we have to make such a big deal out of it. Do we want everyone in Lanling Prefecture City to know how useless we are? Should I ask my father to deal with that brat? Guo Xiao is right, I was wrong. The young man was embarrassed, as if he was afraid that he would be slapped again. If we can't even find a way to deal with that brat, then it can only mean that we are trash. Guo Kun sat up, and a trace of cold arrogance appeared in his eyes, then he said, I'll go find He Jun and ask him to do it. I think it's enough. Yeah, find He Jun, he will definitely be able to deal with that brat. The young man's face was filled with joy. Who? In the room, Du Xiaofu stopped his practice and let out a long breath. After a few hours of meditation, he recovered quite a bit. Walking out of the room, Du Xiaofu stretched his body. In the morning, he took a deep breath of the fresh air in the courtyard, and he felt refreshed and full of energy. Roar! A deep roar suddenly sounded out, and the king-scaled demon tiger came to Du Xiaofu's side. Its eyes were vigilant, as if it was trying to tell Du Xiaofu something. Du Xiaofu's expression sank, and he muttered, Is it those silk pants from yesterday? Bang bang! Early in the morning, the door of the old mansion was kicked open. The door was actually quite sturdy, but it was knocked off its frame and fell to the ground. Following that, hundreds of people walked in aggressively. Guo Kun, why did you bring me here? A tall and sturdy young man walked out from the crowd, and the young man beside him was Guo Kun. Guo Kun stood in front of the tall and sturdy young man, and he was a head shorter. He looked around the old mansion and said, I brought you to find a brat. He is very strong, but I don't know if you are a match for him. Don't tell me you can't beat him. The tall and sturdy young man looked at Guo Kun, and his broad chest muscles bulged slightly. Who are you? Why did you break into my house? At this moment Dai Xingyu hurriedly ran out from the courtyard. When she saw Guo Kun, her face turned pale with fright, and she said, It's you, bad guy. Little girl, we meet again. Guo Kun's eyes flickered, and he said, Where is that brat from yesterday? I don't know. Brother Xiaofu is not here, he left. Although Dai Xingyu was a little flustered, she was not stupid. These people were aggressive, and they must be here to take revenge on Brother Xiaofu. There were so many of them, and Brother Xiaofu definitely could not beat them. Therefore, she must not let Brother Xiaofu be found. She even hoped that Brother Xiaofu had left. Little girl, you don't even know how to lie. Guo Kun's face was gloomy. Looking at Dai Xingyu's flustered appearance, he knew that Dai Xingyu was lying. He said, let's find that brat first, then we will slowly play with you. I didn't expect young Master Guo and young Master He to come. What a coincidence. A clear voice like a silver bell rang out. A girl walked out from the inner courtyard. She looked to be in her early 20s, and she walked slowly. Her delicate body was like a jade willow, light and tender. Some girls were very beautiful, but their temperament was lacking. Some girls might have temperament, but their beauty was lacking. However, this girl was different. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was perfect. This girl was very beautiful. Not only was she beautiful, but she was also very elegant. Her long black hair was so shiny that it could reflect one's reflection. She was naturally draped over her waist. She was wearing a long dress, and her temperament was otherworldly. She was so beautiful that she was like a fairy that had walked out of a painting. Everyone immediately looked at the girl, and many of them were in a daze. Guo Kun and He Jun were also surprised because they knew this girl. However, they did not expect her to appear here. Auntie, they are all bad people. They even bullied me yesterday. If it wasn't for Brother Xiaofu, I wouldn't have been able to come back yesterday. When Dai Xingyu saw this girl, she immediately hid behind her timidly. Then, she thought of something and said in surprise, Auntie, are you all right? That's great. You scared me to death. I didn't know what to do. Luckily, I met Brother Xiaofu. All right, I'm here. There's no need for a handkerchief. The girl patted Dai Xingyu's hair. Then, she looked at Guo Kun and the rest. How could she not know who they were? Miss Yuru, why are you here? Is this little girl your? Guo Kun was surprised. His gaze fell on the girl. He could hear that the little girl seemed to be calling Murong Yuru auntie. This is an old house that I bought a long time ago. Xingyu is my elder sister's daughter. My elder sister and I have a big age difference, so the age difference between Xingyu and me is small. Murong Yuru's eyes were like water as she looked at Guo Kun, He Jun, and the rest. Then, she said, young Master Guo and young Master He came here so aggressively. Could it be that someone has offended the two of you? Chapter 119. It's a boy called Du Xiaofu. Since this is Miss Yorua's home, I'll give you face. I only need to take that boy away, Guo Kun said to Miss Yorua. Guo Kun said to Murong Yorua. Suddenly, he became very elegant and even a little passionate. Murong Yorua frowned inwardly. She knew these people's identities and their power. They could do whatever they wanted in a place as big as Lanling Prefecture City. Young Master Guo, there's only the two of us in my house. There's no one else, Murong Yorua said. Guo Kun was stunned. Then, he looked at Murong Yorua with a slightly gloomy expression. It's fine. I'll just search around. Young Master Guo, that's not very good, Murong Yorua said. Hearing this, Guo Kun's expression became more and more gloomy. He slowly took 2 steps forward, then stared at Murong Yorua and said, Murong Yorua, do you think I'm an idiot? Murong Yorua was stunned. She knew in her heart that Guo Kun was definitely not a fool. She quickly explained, how can young Master Guo be a fool? If you're a fool, then there's no smart person in Lanling Prefecture City. Since you don't think I'm a fool, why are you patronizing me? Don't think that I won't dare to touch you just because you have someone protecting you. You have to understand that no matter what, you're still someone from your hometown. I'm giving you face because of that person. Otherwise, do you think I'll put you in my eyes? Don't really think I'm a fool. Guo Kun was about to explode. If it wasn't for that person, he would have touched this woman long ago. However, that person was sandwiched between them, making him feel very vexed. Murong Yorua sighed. She felt that she was sometimes so powerless. This was not her home. This was Lanling Prefecture City. In this place, there were too many things that were beyond one's control. If it was before, although these people had strong backgrounds, there was no need to care too much. However, everything was different now. You do look like a fool. Don't you know whether you're a fool or not? Dai Xingyu looked innocently at Guo Kun and said, "That's right. If you were an idiot, you wouldn't know. But you are definitely a bad person." As Dai Xingyu spoke, Murong Yurua's expression also began to change. Interesting. Guo Kun, don't tell me you've really gone stupid. He Jun laughed. Seeing Guo Kun being scolded by a little girl, he had no reason not to laugh. This made his mood very good. "Little girl, come over here." Guo Kun's face darkened. He would deal with anyone who laughed at him, but He Jun laughed at him, so he could only vent his anger on Dai Xingyu. "Young Master Guo, that's not what Xingyu meant." Murong Yorua continued to explain. She didn't expect Xingyu to speak so bluntly. She immediately stood in front of Dai Xingyu. "Who do you think you are? Without anyone supporting you, you're nothing. Get lost." Seeing Murong Yorua standing in front of him, Guo Kun became even more furious. He directly waved his hand at Murong Yorua. Guo Kun used his left hand because his right hand hadn't recovered yet. In fact, it wouldn't recover completely in a short period of time. Bang! A deep sonic boom rang out. A faint golden light surged out. Then, Guo Kun's body was directly sent flying. At this moment, He Jun's gaze moved. There was a trace of surprise in his eyes. "Chi!" A purple-robed youth with a wild cat by his side appeared in everyone's line of sight. He had a resolute face and sharp eyes. He was only 16 or 17 years old, but his eyes were filled with a gaze that made one's heart tremble. Murong Yorua curiously looked at the purple-robed youth who suddenly appeared. Her long eyelashes fluttered, and her eyes were like water. She knew that Guo Kun's strength wasn't ordinary. He was at the Pulse Realm and Profound Realm. He was stronger than her. Of course, she had never publicly revealed that she cultivated the martial way in the past 3 years. However, this purple-robed youth was actually able to force Guo Kun back in one move. It was enough to show how strong he was. Murong Yorua could also tell that this purple-robed youth was the youth who had helped her heal yesterday. However, this was the first time she had seen this youth's appearance. He was 16 or 17 years old, younger than her. However, his face was resolute, and the gaze in his sharp and deep eyes made her feel that this youth was different from Guo Kun and the others. Big brother Xiaofu. After seeing Du Xiaofu, Dai Xingyu immediately went to Du Xiaofu's side with a happy and worried expression. She said, "These bad guys are here again." Du Xiaofu's expression eased a little. He patted his chest and said to Dai Xingyu with a smile, "It's all right. I'm the nemesis of bad guys, the embodiment of justice. Don't be afraid. You're not from Lanling Prefecture City." Murong Yorua looked at Du Xiaofu with a frown. "I'm not." Du Xiaofu's gaze finally landed on Murong Yorua. Although he already knew that she was a very beautiful woman yesterday, it felt different when she stood in front of him. Under her long eyelashes, her eyes glowed with spiritual light. Her temperament was like a gentle breeze that gently brushed past. She was very beautiful. This woman was like a flower, but she was definitely not a vase. This was the feeling in Du Xiaofu's heart. Du Xiaofu even felt that when he looked at this woman, something seemed to fluctuate in his heart, stirring up his feelings. "Are you all right?" Du Xiaofu then said a few more words to the woman in front of him. It was as if he should say a few more words to this woman. "I'm fine. Thank you." Murong Yorua looked at Du Xiaofu with some gratitude in her eyes. But then, for some reason, a blush crept onto her cheeks. She remembered that it was this young man who had moved his hands up and down her body. "As long as I don't suffer any losses, it's fine." He Jun looked at Du Xiaofu and said. "No. Du Xiaofu shook his head. He still regretfully said to He-jun, Guokun deliberately sent you here. He didn't want you to deal with me, but wanted me to deal with you. In fact, compared to you, my relationship with him is deeper. You have feelings for Guokun? He-jun was puzzled. He really couldn't tell. Bastard, when did we have feelings for each other? Guokun, who was behind He-jun, finally couldn't bear it and loudly shouted at Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu was indifferent. He looked at Guokun and said, as the saying goes, beating is affection and scolding is love. Without beating or scolding, there are no feelings. I broke both your hands and scolded you yesterday. Doesn't that mean we have feelings for each other? When Guokun heard this, his face turned red with anger. Pfft. Dai Xingyu couldn't help but laugh. Morong Yorua also pursed her lips and smiled. Her gaze was fixed on the youth's back. You have a glib tongue. You're very similar to that brat Meng Laikai. I don't really like him. He-jun shook his head. His eyes suddenly revealed an ominous glint. He stared at Du Xiaofu and said, but I feel that you won't be enough for me to beat you up. How about this, hand over your Qianquan bag and I won't beat you up. As his voice faded, a powerful aura surged from He-jun's body towards Du Xiaofu. In an instant, an extremely terrifying aura erupted. Du Xiaofu's face immediately sank. He then slightly raised his head to look at He-jun, carefully sizing him up. Chapter 120. Are you considering it? He-jun asked coldly. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. Coupled with that burly body of his, he looked really ferocious. If it were someone who was timid, they would have handed over their Qianquan pouch in fright. Sigh, it's been so hard on me. Du Xiaofu looked at He-jun and said, I'm not familiar with Lanling Prefecture City. If I really wanted to kill you, I would have some misgivings. However, if I don't beat you up, I'll feel very uncomfortable right now. I'm also afraid that you'll come and cause trouble for me in the future. Tell me, what should I do with you? Kill you or let you go? He-jun was stunned. His eyes widened, thinking that he had heard wrongly. Everyone thought that they had misheard. Where did this brat come from? How could he be so overbearing and arrogant? Didn't he know that the person in front of him was the young sect leader of the White Tiger sect? I've decided. I'll beat you half to death. This way, I won't have any scruples and you won't easily provoke me in the future. What do you think? Du Xiaofu looked at He-jun seriously and asked. Brat, you're courting death. He-jun was infuriated. The murderous glint in his eyes flickered as he flew into a rage. This brat was toying with him. A terrifying aura burst out from his body like a flood. He was at the peak of the pulsation realm, close to the perfected level of the pulsation realm. Boom! He-jun's burly body stomped on the ground, causing the ground to tremble. He-jun punched out with his fist. Runes surged, bringing with it a terrifying gust of wind that blew many of the surrounding guards. In an instant, the fist arrived in front of Du Xiaofu. Not bad. You're at the peak of the Nirvana realm. Du Xiaofu was a little surprised. Pulse realm peak Nirvana realm. Compared to first uncle, there was not much difference. As expected of a big place like Lanling Prefecture City. These young people were stronger than one another. It was different from a small place like Stone City. At this instant, Du Xiaofu naturally didn't stay idle. He didn't retreat but instead advanced, preparing to take it head-on. He similarly blasted out a fist that was wrapped in golden light runes, and its aura was domineering and fierce. Boom! Their fists collided, and their profound energy collided. Immediately, a muffled sound exploded in midair, and a terrifying wave surged out. Then, the two figures were forced back at the same time. Dang dang! Stumbling, Du Xiaofu's body only took 3 steps back. His gaze also changed slightly. This big guy was really not weak, even his fist was a little numb. He-jun was even more shocked. Pain came from his fist, and he took 6 steps back. Every step he took left a hole in the ground. Humph! Du Xiaofu snorted coldly. He stared at He Jun and pounced forward again. This time, it was Du Xiaofu who took the initiative to attack. He punched out again. It was simple, powerful, and domineering. He Jun's fist was trembling. He took a deep breath, but he still gritted his teeth and threw another punch. Both of their fists collided again. Shockwaves soared into the sky, and the ground trembled. This time, He Jun was forced back again, and blood appeared on his fist. After stumbling a few steps back, He Jun stabilized his body. Looking at the blood on his fist, he gasped. He never thought that the cultivation technique he cultivated would be so overbearing. The toughness of his body was comparable to that of a demonic beast. However, the young man on the other side was obviously younger than him. Even his fist was smaller. However, the toughness of his fist was something that even he couldn't contend against. I don't believe it. He Jun refused to admit defeat. Among his peers, he had never seen anyone who could contend against the toughness of his body. He condensed a hand seal, and his body was enveloped in a layer of yellow rune energy. Then, he pounced towards Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu's eyes moved, and a smile appeared in his eyes. If they were to compete with martial techniques, with He Jun's pulse realm cultivation at the peak of the Nirvana realm, it wouldn't be easy for him to deal with him. He might even have to fight with his life on the line. After all, his cultivation level was still far from He Jun's. If he could break through to the pulse realm soon, it would be much easier for him to deal with He Jun. However, Du Xiaofu wasn't afraid of He Jun at all if they were to compete with the strength of his body. His cultivation of the body had already reached the stage where he could cleanse his bones and cleanse his marrow. In addition to all kinds of refinement of his body, Du Xiaofu knew that the toughness of his body had always been his advantage. It was an absolute advantage. Boom! Du Xiaofu moved. Just as He Jun's burly body pounced towards him, golden runes surged out from his body again. In an instant, his aura suddenly became overbearing. It was as though he was a real demonic beast in human form. Accompanied by a dazzling light, under everyone's shocked gaze, including He Jun's, his body collided with He Jun's. Colliding with each other with their bodies was a powerful collision. It was like a cannonball, and it was stupefying. Bang! A deep sonic boom resounded. Runes flashed and waves of air spread out like waves in water. After which, everyone saw He Jun's burly body being directly sent flying. He was sent flying violently, while Du Xiaofu's body only trembled slightly. He Jun was sent flying on the ground, causing the ground to tremble and crack. Blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. His eyes were filled with shock. He didn't expect Du Xiaofu's body to be so powerful. It didn't seem like a normal human at all. Bang! He Jun didn't manage to get up. A golden figure rapidly pounced towards him. It was like an impact cannon, and it ruthlessly landed on his lower abdomen. Poochie! Under the huge impact, it was as if a huge rock weighing 1,000 pounds had fallen. He Jun's body, which had just landed, suffered another heavy blow. A mouthful of blood spurted out from his mouth. I already said that it was Guokun who asked me to take care of you. Du Xiaofu directly sat down on He Jun's lower abdomen. Then, his fists fell down like rain. One after another, his fists pounded on He Jun's chest like beating drums. Poochie! How could the pitiful He Jun withstand Du Xiaofu's terrifying attacks? Mouthful after mouthful of blood spurted out from his mouth. It was a horrible sight to behold. Young sect leader, many of the people who were following him recovered from their shock. They shouted loudly and immediately pounced towards Du Xiaofu. If anything happened to their young sect leader, they would definitely be in trouble when they returned. Whoever dares to come forward, I will cripple him. Du Xiaofu lifted his head. A claw print was directly placed on He Jun's throat. He didn't seem to be joking at all. Brat, stop it. How dare you hurt our young sect leader? Our White Tiger sect won't let you off. More than a dozen White Tiger sect disciples surrounded him. They didn't dare to take even half a step forward. Since you are already hurt, I will hurt you even more. I hate it when people threaten me. As Du Xiaofu spoke, his expression didn't change. His heart didn't skip a beat, and he ruthlessly landed another punch on He Jun's chest. The pitiful He Jun could only allow himself to be trampled on by Du Xiaofu at this moment. Brat, let go of our young sect leader. We won't threaten you. As long as you let go of our young sect leader, everything is negotiable. One of the smarter White Tiger sect disciples immediately said to Du Xiaofu. His expression changed drastically. Everyone, give me your Qianquan bags. Otherwise, I will destroy him. Du Xiaofu turned his gaze and looked at the dozen White Tiger sect disciples. He continued to place his claw print on He Jun's neck. The dozen White Tiger sect disciples looked embarrassed. Almost all of their savings and treasures were kept in their Qianquan bags. If they gave it away, it would be equivalent to them going bankrupt. Is your young sect leader's life not as important as your Qianquan bags? It seems like your young sect leader is only so in your hearts. Du Xiaofu smiled and landed another punch on He Jun's chest. At the same time, he said, if you think about it for one more breath, I will give him one more punch. We will give it to you. We will give it to you. The few White Tiger sect disciples who were the leaders immediately agreed. However, they looked like they were about to cry. In their hearts, they were probably cursing Du Xiaofu's 18 generations of ancestors. This was simply too vicious. He was simply trying to sow discord. If they did not hand over the Cosmos sack, not to mention whether or not this brat would really kill the young sect master, the young sect master would definitely not let them off in the future if he continued to throw punches at them. However, we only have 5 Qianquan bags. The other disciples don't have any Qianquan bags. The few White Tiger sect disciples who were the leaders said to Du Xiaofu. Not everyone had a Qianquan bag. Only 5 Qianquan bags out of the dozen of them. At this moment, their hearts were all broken. That's more like it. Du Xiaofu smiled. He then turned around and said to Dai Xingyu, who was standing behind him with a shocked expression, Xingyu, go and keep the Qianquan bags. Okay. At this moment, Dai Xingyu's mind seemed to be a little blank. He actually nodded his head. Then, he quickly ran in front of the few White Tiger sect disciples and kept the 5 Qianquan bags. And yours. Du Xiaofu was very satisfied. He then searched He Jun's body. In the end, he also took out a Qianquan bag and kept it skillfully. Then, he patted He Jun's chest and said, you're quite sturdy. It's just that you can't take a beating. Pfft. This time, He Jun was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. In the entire Lanling Prefecture city, he was always the one who robbed others. However, today, he was robbed by someone else. Moreover, he was severely beaten up. What angered him the most was that this brat didn't seem to care about him at all. It was as if he hadn't had his fill of beating him up. Don't be agitated. I already said that it was Guokun who harmed you. After being beaten up by me, he felt that he couldn't step down from the Lanling 4 young masters. In the future, he will feel that he is inferior to all of you. Therefore, he purposely dragged you into this. Now that you have been beaten up by me, he will have a companion. He won't be afraid of losing face anymore. Du Xiaofu climbed up from He Jun's body. He Jun was stunned. He suddenly felt that Du Xiaofu's words made sense. Guokun purposely harmed him. Guokun didn't just want to use him to teach Du Xiaofu a lesson. Instead, he wanted to use Du Xiaofu to teach him a lesson. I'm a little late for the second night watch period. The next chapter will take an hour and a half. Xiao Yu is working hard to write. Chapter 121. Seeing that He Jun was moved, Du Xiaofu enthusiastically helped He Jun up. What shocked everyone the most was that Du Xiaofu even took out a pill and stuffed it into He Jun's mouth. He said regretfully, "This is a healing pill. You were beaten up quite badly by me. I'm sorry, I really didn't want to hit you. If it wasn't for Guokun, I wouldn't have hit you." He Jun glared at Du Xiaofu. No one knew what he was thinking, but it was obvious that his face was conflicted and his eyes were twitching. He knew that this brat had beaten him up, but he could still act like a good person without batting an eyelid. This brat was too shameless. He was even more shameless than Guokun. However, he felt that this brat's words made sense. Why aren't you guys helping your young sect leader? Hurry up and go back to treat his injuries. If you're too late, it will affect his foundation in the future. Du Xiaofu shouted at the dozen or so White Tiger sect disciples. He Jun was already unable to stand up after being beaten up by Du Xiaofu's punches. Young sect leader, hurry up and help the young sect leader. The dozen or so White Tiger sect disciples regained their senses and were stunned for a moment. Then, they crowded around and helped the young sect leader up before leaving. They didn't want their young sect leader to fall into the hands of this fickle fiend. Before He Jun walked out of the door, he glared fiercely at Guokun. It was obvious that he felt that Du Xiaofu was shameless, but what he said made sense. Guokun's eyes twitched as he looked at Du Xiaofu with an ugly expression. Then, he said, "Du Xiaofu, we'll meet again." As soon as he finished speaking, Guokun turned around to leave. He Jun had already left with such injuries, so there was no point for him to stay. Although he had brought a dozen or so people with him this time, he was afraid that they wouldn't be able to do anything to that terrifying brat even if they surrounded him. Hence, there was no need for him to stay. After the fight with He Jun just now, he knew how terrifyingly powerful that brat was. "Did I say that you can leave?" An indifferent voice rang out with a hint of coldness. Guokun turned his head around and stared at the owner of the voice, Du Xiaofu. At that moment, he could feel the coldness surging out of the man's eyes under his sharp brows. It was true coldness. "What are you trying to do? If you dare touch me, you won't be able to fly out of Lanling Prefecture City even if you grow wings." Guokun stared at Du Xiaofu. He didn't know why, but the coldness in Du Xiaofu's eyes made his heart tremble. This was a feeling he had never felt in the Lanling Prefecture City. He was starting to regret that he didn't bring any experts with him this time. Muong Yorua, who had been surprised all this time, seemed to want to say something when she saw that Du Xiaofu still wanted to deal with Guokun. However, she immediately held back. There was a bitter smile on her face. Since he dared to deal with He Jun, it didn't matter if Guokun was added to the mix. Perhaps he also had a powerful background, so powerful that he didn't need to fear a force like the White Tiger sect. Du Xiaofu did not reply because there was no need for him to do so. Just as Guokun finished speaking, his figure had already appeared in front of Guokun like a bolt of lightning. Guokun had actually discovered Du Xiaofu, but his injuries from yesterday had not healed, and his left hand was almost crippled to the point that it could not move for the time being. Therefore, it was difficult for him to put up any resistance, and he could only hastily retreat as his expression changed. Bang! However, Du Xiaofu's speed was much faster than his. A fist ruthlessly landed on Guokun's chest. Guokun's body was sent flying. However, before his body could even land on the ground, Du Xiaofu pounced on him and kicked him even further away. The kick caused Guokun's mouth to drip with blood. Slash! Just as Guokun's body was about to land on the ground, Du Xiaofu's devil-like figure appeared again. He lifted Guokun's feet with both hands and lifted Guokun's body above his head like a sandbag. Then, he ruthlessly slammed Guokun onto the ground. Bang, bang, bang. After 3 consecutive slams, the ground rumbled loudly. Guokun was thrown so hard that he couldn't even scream. His head was bleeding profusely and his bones were broken. "I will punish you on behalf of justice." When the 4th slap came, Du Xiaofu didn't throw Guokun onto the ground. Instead, he threw him like a stone and ruthlessly flung him across the courtyard. Then, Guokun's body flew out of the courtyard. No one knew how far he was flung and where he landed in the end. However, one could hear the rumbling sound of the ground trembling from the fall. Remember this. The next time you provoke me, I will take your life. Du Xiaofu said loudly. After doing all this, he clapped his hands and another Qianquan pouch appeared in his hand. Then, he very naturally kept it in his arms as if it was a matter of course. Young Master Gua, in the courtyard, the dozens of people immediately ran out in shock. They didn't know whether their master was dead or alive. They didn't even know where he had flown off to. What else could they do? Moreover, none of them believed that they could be thrown so many times by that terrifying young man without dying. Dai Xingyu's mouth was wide open and her body trembled slightly. Obviously, she was a little frightened. Morong Yorua's eyes flashed with a strange light before she regained her calmness. I'm sorry. It seems that you need to move to another place. Du Xiaofu looked at the woman and said. His gaze was a little embarrassed. He wasn't afraid of hurting Guokun and He Jun this time, but he was afraid that it would implicate Dai Xingyu and her beautiful aunt. There's no need for that. No matter what Guokun and He Jun do, they won't make things too difficult for me. Morong Yorua looked at Du Xiaofu and said, what are you going to do? Guokun and He Jun won't let this go. I don't know what to do. I haven't thought about it, Du Xiaofu said with a smile. I just feel that I have to represent justice and beat them up. Pfft. Morong Yorua finally couldn't help but laugh. She wanted to laugh, but she couldn't in front of Guokun and He Jun. But now, she finally couldn't help but laugh. Brother Xiaofu, your Qianquan pouch. Dai Xingyu came in front of Du Xiaofu and handed the 5 Qianquan pouches she had obtained from the White Tiger sect's disciples to Du Xiaofu. Her little heart was still thumping. She was so scared that she hadn't completely recovered from her shock. I'll give it to you. Maybe you'll really have to find another place to stay when the time comes. Du Xiaofu said to Dai Xingyu. This little girl seemed to be relatively poor. If they were to change places, she probably wouldn't have any money. Back then, she had to sell her ancestral heirloom for 1,000 cultivation coins. Even if you give me this Qianquan pouch, I won't be able to open it. Dai Xingyu blinked and said. You're a spirit talisman master. How can you not open it? Du Xiaofu said. These Qianquan pouches shouldn't have been refined by some expert. It wasn't difficult to open them. Dai Xingyu raised her head and looked at Du Xiaofu with clear eyes. She said weakly, I haven't learned how to open a Qianquan pouch. Du Xiaofu was stunned again. Then, he could only helplessly take the Qianquan pouch. Xingyu, didn't I say not to casually expose your identity as a spirit talisman master? Morong Yorua came to Dai Xingyu's side and frowned. Dai Xingyu felt wronged and said, Auntie, I didn't expose myself. It was Big Brother Xiaofu who saw it himself. Then, as if she remembered that she hadn't introduced him to her auntie, she immediately said, Auntie, this is Big Brother Du Xiaofu. He saved you and healed your injuries. Morong Yorua already knew that it was the young man in front of her who saved her. But now, she was surprised that he could sense the aura of a spirit talisman master from Dai Xingyu. But then, her eyebrows twitched. It wasn't strange. A 16 or 17-year-old youth was able to trample on He Jun and Guokun. How could he be simple? Big Brother Xiaofu, this is my auntie, Morong Yorua. Isn't she beautiful? Dai Xingyu raised her head and said to Du Xiaofu. Yes, very beautiful. Du Xiaofu didn't know how to respond. He could only nod. However, he felt that Morong Yorua's name was very pleasant to hear. Little circle circle. Dai Xingyu suddenly saw the king-scaled demonic tiger. She immediately lifted it up like a kitten and hugged it in her arms. Then, she stroked the king-scaled demonic tiger's head and said, Little circle circle, were you scared just now? I was scared. Those bad people are too bad. Don't be afraid. I will protect you. Du Xiaofu looked at the king-scaled demonic tiger and then pretended not to see it. Roar. I am a king-scaled demonic tiger. I am a different king-scaled demonic tiger. I don't need to be scared. The king-scaled demonic tiger unwillingly roared in its heart. But there was nothing it could do. It could only be sullen. This time, thank you. Morong Yorua looked at Du Xiaofu. Her watery eyes regained their calmness. Then, she said, I wonder where young Master Du is from. Do you have a place to stay in Lanling Prefecture City? I'm not a young master. Du Xiaofu smiled. He wasn't a young master. Morong Yorua obviously wanted to know if he had any background. He said, I come from a small place. I'm afraid Miss Yorua wouldn't know even if I told you. I just arrived in Lanling Prefecture City yesterday. Is that so? Morong Yorua frowned when she heard this. She looked at Du Xiaofu and said, let's talk inside. The small hall in the old mansion was clean and simple, but it was very exquisite. Du Xiaofu sat while Morong Yorua brewed a cup of tea. The fragrance of the tea overflowed, making Du Xiaofu's taste buds tremble. This tea is delicious, he couldn't help but impatiently take a sip of the tea. Suddenly, the tea fragrance overflowed. It was as if every taste bud was experiencing the ultimate taste. It was as if a storm of fragrance had set off in his mouth. The surface of his tongue was salivating. Big brother Xiaofu, my aunt is very good at brewing tea. Dai Xingyu said disapprovingly. Chapter 122. You know about tea? Morong Yorua looked at Du Xiaofu with some surprise in her eyes. I don't. Du Xiaofu shook his head and said, I rarely drink tea, but I drink more than I drink tea. Although I don't know much about tea, I can see that this tea is very clear. The clearer the tea is, the better it is. After a pause, Du Xiaofu continued, this tea is light yellow and translucent. It has a mellow and refreshing taste. The taste is harmonious and sweet. The fragrance is clear and exudes a kind of domineering aura. The tea is firm, but the tea is clear. When you drink it, you won't be able to feel anything and won't be able to recall the aftertaste. The heavy domineering aura will attack you and confuse you. Du Xiaofu finished speaking and took another big gulp. He directly drank it all and said, this is really good tea. Morong Yorua's eyes fluctuated after hearing Du Xiaofu's words. Her red lips gently opened and said, although you don't know much about tea, you can see it more clearly than anyone else. You don't know much, but you know a lot. Just like what the ancients said, great elegance is great elegance, great elegance is great elegance. Great elegance is great elegance, great elegance is great elegance, Du Xiaofu repeatedly repeated this sentence. He then looked at Morong Yorua and said, since this tea can be placed at home, it should be Miss Morong's favorite tea, right? Brother Xiaofu is so amazing. This tea was personally made by my aunt. She doesn't sell it to anyone. I don't usually get to drink it. However, I don't like drinking this tea either. It tastes like strong liquor. It doesn't feel like tea at all. Dai Xingyu said from the side. Du Xiaofu was a bit surprised. He looked at Morong Yorua and said, I didn't expect Miss Morong to know how to make tea. I wonder if this tea has a name. It's called Phoenix. Morong Yorua hesitated for a moment before adding, you are the first to know the name of this tea. Phoenix, a good name. It is very suitable for this tea. Du Xiaofu softly said. You guys talk, I'll go play with little circle circle. Dai Xingyu felt that he couldn't get a word in edgewise, so he left the hall with the king-scaled demon tiger in his arms. The king-scaled devil tiger's eyes were filled with despair. It looked at Du Xiaofu for help, but Du Xiaofu pretended not to see it. If you leave Lanling Prefecture City now, you should be able to avoid a lot of trouble. Morong Yorua looked at Du Xiaofu and said. Du Xiaofu knew what Morong Yorua was talking about. He shook his head and said, I just arrived at Lanling Prefecture City yesterday. I still have some unfinished business. I will only leave when I'm done. Morong Yorua looked at Du Xiaofu. After a while, she said softly, "How about this? I'll think of something. I hope it works. As long as you don't cause any trouble." Du Xiaofu could tell that Morong Yorua seemed to have some connections. This way, he was relieved. As long as he didn't cause any trouble for them, it was fine. Then, he asked Morong Yorua, "Miss Morong, what is the background of the Lonling fourth young master?" The Lonling four young masters are four young men in Lonling Prefecture City. However, their backgrounds aren't ordinary. Their backgrounds are enough to cover the entire Lonling Prefecture City. You've already met Guokun and He Jun. The other two are called Meng Laikai and Han Xian. Morong Yorua said to Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu then found out from Morong Yorua that the forces behind the Lonling four young masters were indeed powerful. There were countless forces of various sizes in the Lonling Prefecture City. However, the top forces among them were the White Tiger Sect, the Old Garden, and the Equipment and Treasure Trading Company. The White Tiger Sect was the biggest force in Lonling Prefecture City. They had as many experts as there were clouds in the sky. They were powerful and controlled many of the black markets in Lonling Prefecture City. The treasure merchant was one of the top merchants in Lonling Prefecture City. It was rumored that their wealth could rival the prefecture city. The Old Garden was a place of romance. However, no one would think that the Old Garden wasn't big because it was the most bustling and lively place in the entire Lonling Prefecture City. The expenses were expensive and those who could enter the Old Garden were all symbols of status. It was said that only members could enter. Just a membership card alone would cost at least 100,000 cultivation coins. Among the Lonling four young masters, Guokun was the young master of the treasure merchant. He Jun was the young master of the White Tiger Sect. Meng Laikai was the young master of the Old Garden. Lastly, Han Xian was the young master of Lonling Prefecture City. It wasn't inappropriate for these four young men to be called the Lonling four young masters. The main reason why the people of Lonling Prefecture City called them the Lonling four young masters was because the four young men were loathed by the entire city. Guokun was lustful and would often snatch women on the streets. As long as they were beautiful, he would snatch them first. He Jun liked to fight and snatch things. He would often start a fight whenever there was a disagreement. It was said that behind He Jun was Han Xian. When the two of them joined forces, most of the merchants in Lonling Prefecture City had received protection fees. To put it bluntly, they had been extorted. Meng Laikai was a little gentler. He only did business and indeed had a business mind. As long as he was involved in a business, there would be no business that wouldn't make money. However, what made people angry was that as long as Meng Laikai saw other people's business making money, he would forcefully intervene and kick them out. As long as it was his business, no one else was allowed to touch it. As expected of the Lonling four young masters, Du Xiaofu smiled after learning the identities of the four young men. Morong Yorua looked at Du Xiaofu. Her purple dress made her look even more otherworldly. She said, "If you want to leave Lonling Prefecture City now, you might still be able to make it." "No, I still have some things to do." Du Xiaofu got up and planned to leave. "Then be careful. I'll go think of a way." "I hope I can help," Morong Yorua said to Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu left the old mansion. However, in order to ensure the safety of Dai Xingyu and Morong Yorua, he secretly instructed the king's scaled demon tiger to accompany the two women. He walked into Lonling Prefecture City alone. The bustling streets were extraordinarily lively. The degree of prosperity was breathtaking. Du Xiaofu went to find the Lonling Prefecture City's mansion master. To be able to beat up Guokun and He Jun in Lonling Prefecture City, Du Xiaofu wasn't stupid. He definitely had some backing. And the backing Du Xiaofu was naturally the Lonling Prefecture City's mansion master. Since his drunkard father said that he knew the Lonling Prefecture City's mansion master, Ouyangling, it meant that their relationship wasn't bad. As the Lonling Prefecture City's mansion master, it shouldn't be a problem for him to take care of him. Du Xiaofu believed in his drunkard father's vision. Du Xiaofu wasn't worried about himself. He could just leave after beating up Guokun and He Jun. However, he had to consider Dai Xingyu. Perhaps it was because he knew that he had a younger sister. When he saw Dai Xingyu, Du Xiaofu thought of his younger sister that he had yet to meet. Xiao Jing, walking on the street, Du Xiaofu murmured. His younger sister's name was Xiao Jing. It was a pretty name. She should be a very pretty girl. However, his younger sister was a heavenly venerate. She would definitely be extraordinary. Thinking of this, Du Xiaofu didn't feel jealous. Instead, he felt proud. That was because that was his younger sister. Her twin sister. Lanling Prefecture City. It was located in a rather quiet place in the Lanling Prefecture City. It was deep in the palace and the courtyard was deep. Just the tall and thick walls alone were enough to make one sigh. In fact, it wasn't difficult to find the residence of the Lanling Prefecture Master in Lanling Prefecture City. Just ask anyone and you'll probably find out. However, just because anyone could find the residence of the Lanling Prefecture City's Mansion Master, it didn't mean that anyone could meet him. How could anyone be able to meet a feudal lord of a region just because they wanted to? Du Xiaofu was like that now. He couldn't enter the Lanling Prefecture City at all. Standing in front of the grand entrance of the Lanling Prefecture City, there were two stone lions prostrating on the left and right. Du Xiaofu could feel an indescribable aura in the calm Lanling Prefecture City. It made him feel pressured. That was a place where a marquis was in charge. It was extraordinary. In front of the Lanling residence, 6 burly men in armor stood in an orderly manner. Their aura was sharp and they were all at the innate realm. The leader was even at the nirvana realm of the innate realm. He was glaring at Du Xiaofu and yelled, looking for the residence master. To think that a kid like you would say that. Do you know how many people want to see the residence master every day? If it wasn't for your young age, I would have thrown you far away. You can't throw me away because I'm your mansion master's relative. Du Xiaofu said seriously to the leader. Relative? Brat, do you know how many people pretend to be the manor head's relatives in front of me every day? Little guy, hurry up and leave. Go to wherever it's cool. The burly man waved his huge fist in front of Du Xiaofu's eyes and said, Do you believe that I won't beat you up? Du Xiaofu was helpless. It seemed like many people were using this method. He turned his gaze and said to the burly man, You must have been working in the Lanling Prefecture City for a long time, right? The burly man stopped waving his fist. With pride, he said, Of course, I've been working in the Lanling Prefecture and following the mansion master. I often see him. But you haven't been promoted for a long time, definitely a long time. Many people with similar strength as you have been promoted, right? They even got some benefits and their strength increased by a lot. Du Xiaofu said seriously to the burly man. How do you know? The burly man looked at Du Xiaofu suspiciously, but then he felt that something was wrong. He puffed up his chest and said, Brat, what do you know? Don't talk nonsense. I originally wanted to give you a few pointers, but since you're not interested, then forget it. Sigh. Du Xiaofu sighed slightly. His face revealed a look of regret, and then he turned around to leave. Hey! The burly man gritted his teeth and called out to Du Xiaofu, Brat, why don't you tell me? I'll treat it as a way to relieve my boredom. 5:00, thank you to many brothers for your tips, thank you. Xiao Yu continued to write. About 2 hours later. Before he left, he secretly signaled the other 5 burly men to watch Du Xiaofu, as if they were afraid that Du Xiaofu would take the opportunity to slip away. Du Xiaofu stood outside the gate, and his eyes flickered. He was a little uncertain in his heart. After all, he didn't know how deep the relationship between his drunkard father and the Lanling Prefecture Lord was. Everything was just a guess. The courtyard was deep, and the palace buildings were continuous. In a majestic hall, in an ancient study room, a middle-aged man was holding a jade slip in his hand. The runes on the jade slip were fluctuating. It was a message jade slip. This kind of message jade slip wasn't hard to find, and was usually used to transmit messages. It was extremely convenient to leave a voice or text in the jade slip. This middle-aged man had a handsome face, and his thick eyebrows were slightly raised in a rebellious manner. Under his long and slightly curled eyelashes, his eyes were slightly closed as he peered at the message in the jade slip. He had a handsome nose and slightly tanned skin. No matter how one looked at him, he was a handsome and heroic man. Phew! After a while, the middle-aged man opened his eyes. His eyes were as clear as the morning dew, and there was a glimmer of light in them. He muttered softly, "This guy, it's been almost 17 years. Finally, he's making a move." Brother Ling, the study room was pushed open, and a beautiful figure in a fiery red dress ran in. She was a beautiful woman in her 40s, but she looked extremely young. Her slender figure was curvaceous, and her footsteps were light. Her red dress was adorned with bracelets, and her black hair was tied up in a flowing cloud bun with a few beaded flowers in it. She rushed to the middle-aged man's side in a few steps. "Sister Sean, the child is already so old. Why are you still so anxious? Could it be that the girl has done something out of line again?" The middle-aged man turned around and looked at the beautiful woman. His clear eyes were filled with love and tenderness. "Brother Ling, look," the beautiful woman raised her head. On her beautiful face, her jade-like skin was flushed red. Her crescent brows and starry eyes were filled with excitement. She immediately handed the long sword in her hand to the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man's gaze landed on the sword. Immediately, his eyes that were as clear as morning dew trembled. His body also trembled. He grabbed the sword and touched the cracks on the hilt. His throat began to choke as he said with a trembling voice, "Azure Vein Sword, this is the Azure Vein Sword. When I first met that guy, I gave him the Azure Vein Sword." The middle-aged man looked at the beautiful woman in front of him and said, "Sister Sean, is that guy here? Did he come to the Lonling Prefecture city?" The beautiful woman in the red dress also trembled slightly, but she shook her head and said, "There's a report outside the prefecture. It's a young man. He said he's your relative." "Relative?" the middle-aged man muttered softly. He then smiled and said, "It must be that guy's son. I just received news about the father and son from the Flowing Cloud Prefecture. I didn't expect that little guy to come. It's Sister Ao Tong's child. What a pitiful child. Let's go and bring him home." The beautiful woman in the red dress unknowingly teared up. "Bring him home," the middle-aged man's eyes moved, and then he muttered, "Yes, that guy and his child. That's our child. That child is so pitiful." The beautiful woman's eyes were wet, and she said softly, "Since he's here, I'll take good care of him for Sister Ao Tong. I won't let him suffer the slightest bit." After she finished speaking, the beautiful woman immediately turned around and went to bring the child back. Buzz! The long sword was unsheathed, and the sound of the sword was clear and crisp. "Sister Sean, wait." The middle-aged man immediately stopped the beautiful woman in the red dress. He carefully looked at the cyan vein sword in his hand, and his gaze fluctuated. "Brother Ling, what's wrong?" the beautiful woman in the red dress asked curiously. The middle-aged man looked at the cyan vein sword in his hand and said, "Sister Sean, what did you see? Isn't it just the cyan vein sword? There's nothing special about it." The beautiful woman looked at the cyan vein sword, but she couldn't see anything special about it. "That guy asked the little guy to come and find us. Why would he need a keepsake? Could it be that he needs something like that?" The middle-aged man looked at the cyan vein sword in his hand and slightly sighed. He said, "The cyan vein sword was given to him when we first met. He saved my life, so I gave it to him. Right now, he's giving me the cyan vein sword and his son. It means that he wants to entrust them to me." "Brother Ling, you mean?" The beautiful woman in the red dress facial expression changed a lot. She said with astonishment, "Could it be that that guy wants to act alone? He's giving us his son, so he doesn't have anything to worry about. I'm afraid that's the case. He's already waited for 17 years. Now that his son has grown up, after giving him to us, he doesn't have anything to worry about. The middle-aged man sighed. That guy, he's going alone. No matter what, he can't defeat such a monstrous being. The beautiful woman in the red dress sighed. Her eyes were filled with coldness, and she said, "It's a pity that we're not strong enough to help them. Now that he's giving us the cyan vein sword and his son, it's not just because he wants to entrust his son to me. With our relationship, he doesn't need to entrust his son to me. He won't do that." The middle-aged man slightly frowned. He shook the cyan vein sword in his hand. In a flash, a sword chi burst out. The cyan vein sword immediately started buzzing. The sword chi wreaked havoc in the air. It was extremely swift and fierce. The middle-aged man said, "Wherever the sword points, it will only be swift and fierce. That guy wants me to help him fulfill his responsibility. He wants me to help him train his son." Outside the gate, Du Xiaofu was waiting calmly. After a short moment, he saw the big guy run out. "Little guy, the higher-ups asked you to wait." The big guy arrived in front of Du Xiaofu. He looked depressed. He had entered the inner palace, but unfortunately, he didn't even have the chance to see the head manager. He was directly intercepted by the head manager. Then, the head manager took away his job. He didn't even have the chance to see the head manager. "Okay," Du Xiaofu said softly. He didn't know why, but he felt nervous. Du Xiaofu didn't know much about his drunkard father. He had never heard his drunkard father mention any of his friends. But now, the head of the Lonling prefecture was the first person his drunkard father had mentioned. Maybe he could use this opportunity to find out more about his drunkard father's past. This was something he had always wanted to find out. Now that he finally had the chance to come in contact with his drunkard father's past, he felt nervous. The burly man stared at Du Xiaofu, and upon seeing Du Xiaofu's calm and unperturbed expression, he said, "Brat, on account of the fact that I've reported this to you, why don't you tell me the truth? Are you really a relative of the Manor Lord? Even if you aren't, I guarantee that I won't beat you up." Du Xiaofu rolled his eyes at the big guy and asked, "What's your name?" "Wang San, the third son in the family." The big guy was stunned for a moment, then said, "Okay, Wang San, I'll remember you." Patting the big guy's shoulder, Du Xiaofu said with a serious face, "I'll definitely put in a good word for you in front of the governor. Just wait for your promotion." The big guy looked at Du Xiaofu suspiciously. He didn't know if he should believe this little bastard's words. He always felt that this little bastard's mouth was full of lies. Creak, at this moment, the gate of the mansion opened. Usually, the gate of the mansion would only open a small door beside the main gate. When the gate opened, many people hurried out. A beautiful woman in a red dress was the first to rush out. "It's time for the 6th watch. Little you, continue to write." Chapter 124. Madam. When the 6 armored guards saw the beautiful lady dressed in red, they were surprised and quickly bowed. The madam rarely came out. The beautiful woman in the red dress walked out quickly. Then, she walked to Du Xiaofu's side. She had moon-like eyebrows and starry eyes. Her eyes flickered as she carefully observed Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu looked at the beautiful lady dressed in red. He didn't know why, but when he looked at the beautiful lady's eyes, there was a strange fluctuation in his heart. It was as if something had touched his heartstrings, and there was a warm light in his heart. This beautiful lady's eyes were so warm. The beautiful lady dressed in red looked at Du Xiaofu, and her eyes couldn't help but become moist. She reached out and pinched Du Xiaofu's cheeks, and said, "Good child, I've wronged you. Let's go home." The beautiful lady in red spoke with a choked voice, but her face carried a smile. She then pulled Du Xiaofu into the mansion. Du Xiaofu was a little stunned, and he blankly allowed the beautiful lady to pull his hand into the mansion. He didn't know why, but when he saw the beautiful lady's moist eyes, his heart felt sour. This kind of feeling, he had never felt before. Looking at Du Xiaofu being pulled into the mansion by the madam, the 6 armored guards were also stunned. From the looks of it, this young man was not as simple as a relative of the mansion master. He was definitely not an ordinary relative. Luckily, I didn't chase him away, or else, after Huang San recovered from his shock, he wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. In his heart, he secretly said, "Luckily, I didn't chase that brat, no, that young master away. Otherwise, he would have been in big trouble today. I made the right bet this time." Immediately, Huang San's face revealed a smile of fantasy. He imagined that his spring was coming, and soon, he would be in full bloom. "Huang San, you bastard, you actually dared to block the young master outside the mansion. I'll deal with you later." Just as Huang San was fantasizing, a basin of cold water was suddenly poured over him. A middle-aged man wearing a manager's uniform fiercely glared at Huang San, and then quickly followed the madam into the mansion with many maids and guards. Huang San was dumbfounded, he was unable to voice out his bitterness. He wanted to deliver the token but was stopped by this little manager. And now, this guy actually dared to make things difficult for him. He couldn't wait to beat that guy up, but he also knew that he could only endure it. In the Lonling residence, the position of the little supervisor was higher than him. Inside Lonling Prefecture, there were lush trees and exotic flowers. Inside the fake mountain, there was a clear stream that flowed from the depths of the flowers and trees to the crevices of the rocks. Du Xiaofu was pulled by the beautiful woman in the red dress through many courtyards. The path was flat and wide, and on both sides of the path, there were flying towers inserted into the air. There were carved and embroidered thresholds, stone pillars piercing through the clouds, and white stone railings surrounding the pond. There were 3 stone bridges, and there were beasts in the mouth. It was majestic and gorgeous. "Greetings, madam." Along the way, many armored guards with sharp auras bowed respectfully. "All of you remember, this is young Master Xiaofu. If Xiaofu suffers any grievances in the future, I will hold all of you accountable." The beautiful woman in the red dress was talking to all the guards and servants along the way. It could be seen that she was in a very good mood. There was a smile on her face all the time. She was constantly introducing this and that to Du Xiaofu. All the guards and servants in the Lonling residence saw this and were puzzled. No one knew where this young Master Xiaofu came from, but looking at how happy the madam was, she was closer to him than her own son. In the quiet hall, the beautiful woman in the red dress was still sizing up Du Xiaofu. The tears in her eyes had subsided, but they were still filled with love and happiness. She said softly, "You're really strong and handsome, quite similar to that guy." "Madam," Du Xiaofu finally found a chance to interrupt. Along the way, he didn't have a chance to interrupt. The beautiful woman in the red dress was happily introducing everything in the Lonling residence. "I forgot. Look at me, I'm so happy that I'm confused." The beautiful woman in the red dress interrupted Du Xiaofu and smiled, "You should call me aunt. My name is Yuan Shanshan, I'm your father's friend, and also your mother's good sister." "Aunt Shan." Du Xiaofu trembled and nodded. He looked at the beautiful woman in front of him and wanted to ask about his parents, but he was interrupted by Yuan Shanshan again. "Good boy, good boy." Yuan Shanshan interrupted Du Xiaofu and smiled happily, "Since you're here, this is your home from now on. Live well, Aunt Shan will take care of you." "Thank you, Aunt Shan. But this time, I'm here to look for the Lonling residence lord." Du Xiaofu didn't forget the main purpose of coming to the Lonling residence. At this moment, he could more or less confirm that his drunkard father had a good relationship with the Lonling residence lord. Moreover, his drunkard father and mother were also very close to Aunt Shan. Du Xiaofu could feel everything from Aunt Shan's eyes. Yuan Shanshan's eyes imperceptibly flashed with splendor when she heard this, and then she smiled at Du Xiaofu and said, "Your Uncle Ling just happens to be in closed-door cultivation these few days. You'll be able to see him once he comes out. Seclusion, Du Xiaofu was stunned. At this moment, he could naturally guess the relationship between Aunt Shan and the Lonling residence lord, Ouyangling. He hesitated for a moment and looked at Yuan Shanshan with a worried gaze. Silly boy, if you have something to say, just say it. This is your home, don't be so reserved. Yuan Shanshan said, her eyes full of love. Aunt Shan, my father asked me to come here because he wants me to tell Uncle Ling some things about the Drifting Cloud County. I already know about this matter. It's not a big deal. Isn't it just your father destroying some blind fellows in the Drifting Cloud County? Don't worry, there won't be any problems. In the future, there won't be any trouble in the Shire City. Aunt Shan will arrange it well. Yuan Shanshan interrupted Du Xiaofu again. When Du Xiaofu heard this, he felt relieved. At least he didn't have to worry about the Shire City anymore. In the Lonling residence city, the guards changed shifts. After Huang San finished his shift, he returned to the backyard where the guards lived. He was still sulking. Today, he finally had a chance to perform, but that opportunity was wasted. Instead, it was the annoying little housekeeper who made things difficult for him. Infuriating, infuriating. The more Huang San thought about it, the angrier he became. He slapped his thigh fiercely. Huang San, just at this moment, a clear and melodious voice rang out. Following which, a delicate and pretty servant girl walked in. General Manager Chiu, why are you here? Huang San immediately stood up and bowed. He recognized the pretty maid in front of him. She was the favorite of the madam and the general manager of the backyard. She had an extremely high status in the entire Lonling residence. It was said that General Manager Chiu was also a strong person. Ordinary guards were no match for her. Even the strong people in the army had to be respectful to her. The pretty maid glanced at Huang San and said, young Master Xiaofu needs to go out and do something. He specifically asked you to accompany him. I found a few strong people for you to protect young Master Xiaofu. If anything goes wrong, you will be held accountable. He specifically asked me to accompany him. Huang San was stunned. Then, he became excited. If this task was done well, then his promotion in the future would definitely not be a problem. It seemed that young Master Xiaofu was not an ordinary relative of the residence master. At this moment, Huang San felt that this was a sign that he was going to prosper. Perhaps he could start from this matter. Not long later, he would be promoted and get a raise. He would become a squadron leader and then a platoon leader. Then, he would marry the madam's personal maid and walk to the peak of the Lonling residence. Just thinking about it made him excited. Thinking of this, Huang San curiously asked the pretty maid, General Manager Chiu, what is the background of that young Master Xiaofu? Just remember that young Master Xiaofu is your master. There is no need for so much nonsense. After the pretty maid finished speaking, she turned and left. She still wanted to know the background of young Master Xiaofu. Now, everyone in the Lonling residence was guessing, but no one knew. When Du Xiaofu came out of the Lonling residence, it was almost dusk. Aunt Shan kept asking him all sorts of questions. She asked him about his childhood and how his drunkard father was doing these years. When he heard that his drunkard father had been drinking for more than 10 years, and that he was almost unable to cultivate and become a half-cripple, Du Xiaofu saw Aunt Shan's eyes moisten. In the end, if it wasn't for Du Xiaofu saying that he still had some things to do, he wouldn't have been able to leave the Lonling residence. However, the condition that Aunt Shan agreed to let him leave was for him to bring a few people with him. This was so that he wouldn't be unfamiliar with the Lonling residence. Thus, Du Xiaofu thought of Huang San. After all, he was more familiar with Huang San, and it wouldn't be too awkward to follow him around. However, what Du Xiaofu didn't expect was that other than Huang San, Aunt Shan also arranged for 4 Pulse Realm initial stage cultivators to follow him. There was also a perfect Pulse Realm cultivator by his side. There were a total of 7 people. They rode the black-scale demonic horses that represented the Lanling residence, and swiftly went to the old residence. Du Xiaofu was also worried that something might happen to Dai Xingyu and Murong Yorua in the old residence. However, when Du Xiaofu returned to the old residence, only Dai Xingyu and the king-scale demonic tiger were there. The king-scale demonic tiger seemed to have suffered some kind of abuse. When it saw Du Xiaofu return, it had an aggrieved expression and was asking for help. "Big brother Xiaofu, who are they?" Seeing the 7 extraordinary black-scale demonic horses outside the door and feeling the fierce aura of those people, Dai Xingyu instinctively became vigilant after what happened in the morning. "They are my friends. Don't be afraid." Du Xiaofu's gaze swept across the courtyard and asked, "Where's your aunt?" Only then did Dai Xingyu remember. She immediately said to Du Xiaofu, "Big brother Xiaofu, my aunt just left not long ago. She said that she was waiting for you to return and wanted you to go to her hometown." Hometown, Du Xiaofu seemed to be familiar with this name. He seemed to have heard it somewhere before. "I'm so tired. I've already stayed up for 4 consecutive nights. Little you, go rest first. I'll continue to update tomorrow. Brothers, I'll find time to reply to your reviews the day after tomorrow. Brothers, if you haven't slept yet, you should rest early." Chapter 125. Amidst the king-scaled tiger's despairing gaze, Du Xiaofu signaled it to continue protecting Dai Xingyu before walking out of the old residence. The main gate of the old residence was now in perfect condition, but there were signs of new repairs around it. Murong Yorua had probably found someone to repair it during the day. Outside the residence, Du Xiaofu mounted his horse and asked Huang San with a puzzled gaze, "Huang San, where is the old residence?" The old residence. Hearing Du Xiaofu's words, the gazes of Huang San and the 5 people beside him changed. They all looked at Du Xiaofu with a strange expression. As expected of the young master, he's different. So he wants to go to the old residence. Huang San sighed inwardly. The old residence was a place he had always dreamed of visiting, but even with his status, he did not have the qualifications to enter. A simple expenditure in that place for a night was enough to earn him a year's salary. Seeing the strange gazes of Huang San and the others, Du Xiaofu was also puzzled. He asked, "What's wrong? Don't you know about the old residence?" "Young Master Xiaofu, I know about the old residence, but I've never entered it before." Huang San was a little embarrassed, and then respectfully asked a burly man in blue beside him, "Commander Zhang, you should have entered the old residence before. Why don't you tell young Master Xiaofu about it?" The burly man called Commander Zhang immediately blushed slightly, feeling a little embarrassed. After glaring at Huang San, he said to Du Xiaofu, "Young Master Xiaofu, actually I've only been to the old residence once before, and that was with some friends. It's the largest and most famous brothel in Lanling Prefecture City. All the girls there are not only beautiful, but most importantly, they all have extraordinary skills. Some are proficient in zither, chess, calligraphy, and so on. There are so many good points that a single trip there is enough to make a man so happy that he doesn't miss home. So it's a brothel." Du Xiaofu's eyes twitched inwardly. He immediately recalled that the boss of the old garden seemed to be one of the 4 young masters of Lanling, Meng Laikai. He didn't expect that Murong Yorua would ask him to go to the old garden. He didn't know what she wanted him to do. He would only know when he went. After pondering for a moment, Du Xiaofeng felt embarrassed to reveal that he was a rookie who went to a brothel for the first time. He said to the 6 of them, "Let's go. I'll treat you to a drink in my hometown today." "Thank you, young Master Xiaofu." The 6 of them were overjoyed when they heard that. Which man in the entire Lanling Prefecture city would not want to go to a place like their hometown? However, the expenses there were enough to make 99% of the men in the Lanling Prefecture city unable to set foot there. How could they not be happy when their young master invited them to the old garden today? They thought that it would be a tough job today, but they didn't expect that it would be the right decision to come. Especially Huang San. He was very excited today. He was the person that the young master wanted. Moreover, he would be working together with the 4 platoon leaders of the Lanling Prefecture City's private army and a regimental commander that he could only look up to from afar. Putting aside whether he would be promoted in the future, at least in the future, it would be enough to make those who usually made fun of him envious. Clop clop, the horse galloped with an imposing aura. Wherever the black-scaled demonic horse passed, everyone in the Lanling Prefecture City would look at it with a burning gaze. When the lanterns were lit, most of the places in the Lanling Prefecture City were still brightly lit and bustling. The most bustling place was Snow Moon Street, which was not far from the center of the Lanling Prefecture City. Every time the lanterns were lit, Snow Moon Street would be even more bustling than during the day. It was a place where countless men gathered. There was no lack of literati, rich and famous people gathered there. The most famous place in Snow Moon Street was none other than the Old Garden. The Old Garden was the paradise of all men's dreams. It was enough to make countless men's hearts ripple day and night. Snow Moon Street was not allowed to enter with mounts. There was a fixed place for mounts outside the street. One could imagine how crowded Snow Moon Street was. It was a place where all the young masters gathered. Almost all of them had majestic demonic beast mounts. If the demonic beast mounts were allowed to enter, no matter how big the Snow Moon Street was, it wouldn't be able to accommodate more than a few people. It's so lively. Du Xiaofu's group of 7 got off their horses and walked into Shuiyu Street. Seeing the brightly lit street, the scene of the wind, flowers, snow, and moon was filled with the sounds of birds and swallows, they were greatly surprised. On both sides of the street, there were many brothels. On top of those pink pavilions, there were countless seductive women in revealing clothes waving their arms. Many men couldn't resist and walked in without any resistance. Young master, the Old Garden is in front. After walking for a short while, Commander Zhang pointed to the front and said to Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu looked in front. A huge palace garden was located in the middle of Snow Moon Street. On both sides were the intersection of 3 streets. The palace was magnificent and the garden was majestic. The lights were bright and the atmosphere was extraordinary. Looking from afar, this huge palace garden was located on Snow Moon Street. However, it didn't look vulgar at all. Instead, it looked dignified and elegant. This is the Old Garden, Du Xiaofu was secretly surprised. Then, he followed Huang San and the rest into the Old Garden. At the entrance of the Old Garden, there was a sea of people. Everyone had to line up to enter. Among them, there were many rich and famous people in Lanling Prefecture City. However, at this moment, at the majestic entrance of the Old Garden, they still had to line up to enter. There were also many arrogant and unruly young masters in the Lanling Prefecture City who were waiting in line to enter. They were all well behaved and not a single one of them made a ruckus. Instead, there were many discussions in low voices. They were all talking about romantic affairs and the content wasn't very pleasant. The background is not simple. Du Xiaofu stood in the crowd and thought to himself. It was impossible for the Old Garden to not have some powerful background. Young master, do you have a membership card for the Old Garden? Finally, it was Du Xiaofu's turn. When he walked to the entrance of the Old Garden, he was politely stopped by a well-dressed young doorman. He had a smile on his face and looked very friendly. Membership card? What kind of membership card? Du Xiaofu was stunned. He seemed to have recalled that Murong Yorua mentioned before that the Old Garden required members to enter. Not just anyone could enter. Hearing Du Xiaofu's words, the young doorman continued to smile and said to Du Xiaofu, "Our Old Garden has a total of 3 types of membership cards. Silver card, gold card and supreme card. Purchasing a silver card costs 100,000 cultivation coins. After becoming a silver card member, you will be our distinguished guest. Every time you come to the Old Garden, you will receive our best service. Purchasing a gold card costs 500,000 cultivation coins. Gold card members are important distinguished guests of our Old Garden. Every time you come, you will not need to line up. We will arrange a VIP passage for you to enter. You can reserve the best private room and have priority to choose our beauties. There are also many other services. Purchasing a Supreme card costs 3 million cultivation coins. If you are our Supreme card member, then the old garden will be your home. You will definitely be satisfied. The doorman looked at Du Xiaofu and said everything in one breath. His face wasn't red and he wasn't out of breath. It was obvious that he had an extraordinary foundation. Being able to maintain a smile was definitely an extraordinary ability. Then, he continued to smile and asked Du Xiaofu, "May I know what kind of membership card this young master wants to buy?" Hearing the doorman's introduction, Huang San, Commander Zhang and the rest were stunned. The cheapest membership card cost 100,000 cultivation coins. To ordinary wealthy merchants, that was definitely a heartache. Even Commander Zhang was stunned. It wasn't that he didn't have 100,000 cultivation coins, but as a martial artist, he definitely didn't have any cash on him. 100,000 cultivation coins was all the equipment on him, including weapons, elixirs, and so on. As for a gold card that cost 500,000 and a supreme card that cost 3 million, even he could only suck in a breath of cold air. And if he went bankrupt and bought a gold card, he wouldn't have any money to spend. Commander Zhang, Huang San and the rest's gazes fell on Du Xiaofu. They didn't know how much this unfamiliar young master Xiaofu would spend in the gold squandering cave today. The young master that the madam doted on should be a spendthrift. Under everyone's gazes, Du Xiaofu shook his head at the doorman and said, "I'm not buying a membership card. I'm here to look for Lady Murong Yorua." Hearing this, not only did Commander Zhang and Huang San's expressions change, but the smiling doorman's expression also changed. However, he still maintained his smile and said, "Young master, many people who come to the old garden are here to look for Lady Murong Yorua. If you want to enter, you should first buy a card. Only members can enter. I think 100,000 cultivation coins is very expensive. I don't plan to buy it." Du Xiaofu shook his head seriously and thought to himself, could it be that Murong Yorua is very famous in the old garden? Otherwise, why would there be so many people looking for her? Could it be that there are people with the same name? This is the old garden, a place of romance. Could it be? Thinking of this, Du Xiaofu looked at the doorman and said, "But I really want to go in and look for Lady Murong Yorua." Hearing Du Xiaofu's words, some of the people present were stunned. He was clearly here to pick a fight. Not far away, at the entrance of the old garden, a few burly men in tight clothes immediately walked in and stood behind the smiling doorman. Seeing this, the stunned Huang San, Commander Zhang, and the rest also changed their expressions. No matter what, nothing must happen to this young master. Young master, don't make trouble. The smiling doorman looked at Du Xiaofu. The smile in his eyes was not as strong as before. He said, "There are still many people waiting in line. Go home and play. I said that I'm going in to look for someone. I'll come out once I find her." You're a shop. How can you not let people in to look for someone? Could it be that you're a black shop? Du Xiaofu said seriously. When I woke up at 10 in the morning, I saw that there were more than 400 flowers. Thank you. Chapter 126. Spending 100,000 mystic coins to find a person. Although Auntie Shan had given Du Xiaofu a shocking 100,000 mystic coins for him to stroll around Lanling Prefecture as he pleased when he came out today, to have Du Xiaofu spend 100,000 mystic coins as a ticket to find a person in the old garden was something Du Xiaofu would rather die than do. Black market. Hearing Du Xiaofu's words, everyone's expressions changed. The smiling doorman and the burly men behind him also changed their expressions. Within Lanling Prefecture City, who would dare to call the old garden a black market in front of the main entrance? This was definitely the first. Kid, if you don't have money then scram home to drink milk. Even a brat who's still wet behind the ears is here to find a lady, don't block this young master's way. At this moment, a young man in a brocade robe could no longer hold back and rushed out. The little brat in front of him had been blocking his way for a long time. Little brat, go home to drink milk. A brat who's still wet behind the ears actually came to the old garden to find a lady. As the brocade-robed young man walked out, several other young men in brightly colored clothes also walked out one by one, all of them looking at Du Xiaofu with mocking gazes. Seeing this, the smiling doorman and the burly men behind him also stopped what they were doing for a moment. Those who opened the shop were all customers. Since someone else had come to bother them, they were more than happy to watch. Seeing this, Huang San wanted to go forward. As a member of Lanling Manor, although Huang San's strength was average, he had the young master and Lanling Manor behind him. This time, he came to the old garden with the young master. It was considered an errand, so there was nothing to be afraid of. However, just as Huang San was about to step forward, Commander Zhang pulled him back, indicating for him not to act rashly. As a member of the military, he also wanted to test the capabilities of this young master whom the madam doted on so much. Secondly, it was best not to expose his identity as a member of Lanling Prefecture in a place like the old garden. So it's young Master Lin. Young Master Lin, you haven't been here in a long time. Seeing the young man in the brocade robe smiling, the young doorman's face immediately regained its comfortable smile. I've been busy recently, so I went out of town. I haven't been here for a long time. I didn't expect that there would be little brats coming to my hometown looking for girls. Ugh. The brocade-robed young man laughed heartily, his demeanor becoming increasingly arrogant. It seemed that he had bullied many people in the Lanling Prefecture city. His gaze once again mocked Du Xiaofu as he said, "Kid, why aren't you going back to drink milk? Why don't I bring you to my hometown today to broaden your horizons?" Ugh. Du Xiaofu looked at the brocade-robed youth and asked, "Do you have a membership card?" The young man in the brocade robe was stunned. Then, he said proudly, "Of course I do. Not everyone has the ability to get a membership card for my hometown." The green-robed youth was very proud of himself. As a man, having a membership card in his hometown was indeed something to be proud of. "Can you give me your membership card?" Du Xiaofu's eyes immediately lit up as he looked at the brocade-robed youth in front of him. "I'll give it to you." This kid's brain must be fried. So he's an idiot. Hearing Du Xiaofu's words, the young men in colorful clothes who had followed him all laughed heartily. "I'll give it to you." Kid, why should I?" The brocade-robed youth looked at Du Xiaofu and smiled. He did not expect to meet an idiot at the entrance of his hometown. When he entered his hometown later, he would have a good topic to talk about with the girls. Du Xiaofu looked at the brocade-robed youth seriously and said, "Because if you don't give it to me, I will hit you." "What?" The brocade-robed youth was stunned. Then, he looked at Du Xiaofu and sneered mockingly, "Kid, do you know who I am? Are you sure you want to hit me? I don't care who you are. I will hit you." Du Xiaofu nodded and said, "But as long as you give me your membership card, I promise I won't hit you." The brocade-robed youth laughed until tears came out of his eyes. He finally stopped laughing, but he could not help but laugh until his stomach twitched. He said, "Kid, you are really brave. In the Lanling Prefecture city, there are not many people who dare to say that they will hit me. I won't give you my membership card because I really want to know how you will hit me." After saying that, the brocade-robed youth could not help but laugh again. Is there something wrong with young Master Xiaofu's head? Why would he ask for a membership card? Commander Zhang, Huang San, and the others' faces twitched. They originally thought that this young master was here to eat and drink well. They did not expect this young master to be such a young master. Amidst the laughter, Du Xiaofu was still calm. He looked at the brocade-robed youth and said, "How do you compare to Guokun of the Lanling Four Young Masters?" The brocade-robed youth's face twitched when he heard this. Although he was somewhat famous in the Lanling Prefecture city, it was naturally not enough when compared to the Lanling Four Young Masters. They were not on the same level at all. One should know that the young master of the Lanling Prefecture city was one of the Lanling Four Young Masters. He immediately glared at Du Xiaofu and said, "Young Master Guo is a well-known figure in the Lanling Prefecture city. I am naturally a little inferior, but I still meet up with young Master Guo frequently." The brocade-robed youth did not dare to admit that he was comparable to Guo Kun, but he was smart enough to praise himself. However, anyone with a discerning eye would naturally know that when the brocade-robed youth said that he met up with young Master Guo frequently, he was just being a follower. He was probably not even qualified to be a follower. Du Xiaofu did not mind and continued to ask, "How do you compare to He Jun, who is also one of the Lanling Four Young Masters?" "Young Master He." The brocade-robed youth's face twitched again and said, "Young Master He is the young master of the White Tiger sect. His cultivation is amazing, so I am naturally a little inferior." Hearing Du Xiaofu's words, Regiment Commander Zhang, Huang San, and the rest looked at each other and waited to see what would happen. However, all of them were secretly prepared. If anyone dared to touch this young master, they would protect this young master even if they had to tear down this old manor. After all, this old manor was powerful. However, no matter how powerful it was in Lanling Prefecture City, it couldn't be compared to the prefecture master. Du Xiaofu suddenly smiled, then looked at the young man in the brocade robe and said mysteriously, "You probably don't know, but today, He Jun and Guo Kun were both beaten to a pulp. They were beaten so miserably." TSK, what? Young Master Guo and Young Master He were beaten up? Are you kidding me? The brocade-robed youth was stunned. In the entire Lanling Prefecture city, it was impossible for anyone to beat up the two young masters. When the surrounding people heard this, they all became curious. Two of the Lanling Four Young Masters were beaten up. This was definitely the biggest news in the Lanling Prefecture city. Even Huang San, Commander Zhang, and the rest were curious. They had all heard of the Lanling Four Young Masters and had some understanding of them. The sturdy man and the smiling young doorman at the entrance of the Lanling Prefecture city also looked at Du Xiaofu curiously. Young Master Guo and Young Master He, who were equally famous as the young master, were beaten up. This was definitely something that would shock the entire Lanling Prefecture city. When everyone's eyes fell on Du Xiaofu looked at the brocade-robed youth. He was afraid that someone would not believe him and said seriously, "They were really beaten up. They were beaten up badly." "Impossible, who beat them up?" The brocade-robed youth was still in disbelief. "I beat them up. I beat them up on behalf of justice." As soon as Du Xiaofu finished speaking, he threw a punch in front of everyone's eyes. Then, it landed heavily on the brocade-robed youth's nose. Crack! This punch did not use any profound qi, but the brocade-robed youth was not prepared at all. In addition to Du Xiaofu's pure physical strength, the outcome was obvious. When the punch landed, the sound of the brocade-robed youth's nose bone breaking could be heard. The brocade-robed youth screamed and immediately took a few steps back. Blood gushed out from his nostrils. The pain caused by the broken cartilage made him scream. This scene shocked everyone. No one really thought that Du Xiaofu would dare to make a move. "Look, I already said that if you don't give me your membership card, I'll beat you up." As soon as he finished speaking, Du Xiaofu's eyes suddenly turned fierce. This was because Du Xiaofu realized that the other youths around the youth had already rushed over. The few brawny men at the old garden's entrance also rushed over in a panic. Bam, bam. Deep sonic booms kept ringing. The purple-robed figure in the middle of the field dazzled everyone's eyes. A faint golden glow flickered. Bam, bam, everything happened within a few breaths of time. Then, everyone saw the figures that pounced on the purple-robed youth fly out. All of them landed heavily on the street outside the old garden, causing the ground to crack. All of them were dripping with blood. The few youths were actually quite strong. They were all at the innate realm and were considered to be quite capable. Especially the brawny men from the old garden. Their strength was not at the pulse of Tao realm, but they were all at the nirvana realm of the innate realm. The two leaders were even at the complete innate realm. They were definitely not ordinary. However, They were all thrown out in a few breaths of time. How could this not be shocking? Zhang Tuansheng and Huang San were also shocked. They did not even have the chance to make a move. Huang San did not see the attack clearly, but Captain Zhang definitely saw it clearly. It turned out that this young Master Xiaofu was actually such a terrifying person. To be honest, he was really shocked. It's not easy for me to come to Lanling Prefecture City, and you actually want me to go home and drink milk. Are you purposely letting me beat you up? Du Xiaofu's figure appeared in front of the brocade-robed youth who was covering his nose with blood. His fist landed on the youth's palm that was covering his nose. Ah! Brat, you dare to hit! Chapter 127. Bang! The brocade-robed youth screamed, but before he could finish, another punch landed on his mouth. Bang! Immediately after, another punch landed on the bridge of his nose. Save me! The brocade-robed youth screamed in agony. He was also at the Xiantian level, but in front of Du Xiaofu, he had no power to resist at all. He was completely a human punching bag. After taking several punches, he finally fell to the ground. Bang bang bang! Du Xiaofu did not hold back at all, ruthlessly stomping on the brocade-robed youth's abdomen and chest a few more times. He stomped on the brocade-robed youth until he bled profusely. The onlookers were dumbfounded. After a series of stomps, Du Xiaofu stopped stomping. He leaned down, his fierce gaze gradually becoming gentle as he asked, "Now, can you give me your membership card?" "Here, I'll give." The brocade-robed youth, who was drenched in blood and a tragic sight to behold, and who knew how many of his ribs had been broken, could not take it anymore. Enduring the intense pain, he pulled out a glittering silver jade card from his Qianquan bag. This jade card still had runes flashing on it. With a single glance, one could tell that it had come from the hands of a spirit talisman master. "This Qianquan bag is not bad either, I'll take it too." Du Xiaofu unceremoniously snatched the jade card and the Qianquan bag into his hands. Only then did he reveal a satisfied smile, saying, "See, I said that if you didn't give me your membership card, I would beat you. Why didn't you believe me? Now that you've given it to me, I promise I won't beat you." As his voice fell, Du Xiaofu stood up and walked in front of the smiling young doorman, whose face was filled with shock. Waving the jade card he had just snatched, he said, "This should be the membership card. Now that I have a membership card, can you let me in?" "This." The smiling young doorman was stunned. He didn't know what to do in this situation. Nothing like this had ever happened at the entrance of his hometown. Du Xiaofu looked at the smiling doorman and said, "If you don't let me go, then you are deliberately making things difficult for me. If so, I will beat you up." Although Du Xiaofeng was smiling, the young doorman had already seen the speed at which the purple-robed man changed his expression. He then looked at the large men who were still lying on the ground, unable to get up. Finally, he forcefully nodded his head and said, "Young master, please enter. Huang San, let's go in." Du Xiaofu shouted behind him. Then, with his head held high and his chest puffed out, he walked into the imposing entrance of his hometown. He pretended to be an experienced person and thought to himself, "I will never let anyone know that this is my first time in a brothel." "Is this really okay?" Huang San and Regiment Commander Zhang looked at each other in dismay. The word "shock" was still written on their faces. Looking at the bloody figures lying on the ground, they secretly took a deep breath and quickly followed in. Where did this young man come from? He's so fierce. Is this guy trying to overturn the heavens? Don't tell me that Guo Kun and He Jun were beaten up by him. That young man's strength is really strong. It's hard to see through him. As Du Xiaofu, Huang San, and the rest entered the hometown, the surrounding people were discussing and sighing. To be able to enter the hometown like this, today was really an eye-opener. "Bastard, I will not let you go. I will make you pay the price. I will make you suffer a fate worse than death." The brocade-robed young man looked at Du Xiaofu's back. His ribs were broken and he couldn't even get up. After being beaten up, he lost all his face. Even his Chinkuan bag was stolen. How could he not take revenge? After Du Xiaofu, Huang San, and the rest entered the hometown, a magnificent scene appeared before everyone's eyes. It was so magnificent and luxurious that it made people gasp in amazement. Even the roof was covered with pebble-sized luminous pearls. The densely packed interior was extremely dazzling and hazy, causing people to be intoxicated. In addition to the magnificent and luxurious decorations, it was indeed worthy of being a place to indulge in a life of luxury. The interior of the hall was huge. The line of sight was hazy and there was a sea of people. It was completely the legendary wine forest and meat pool, a cave of ecstasy. Young master, lords, please come in. Just as Du Xiaofu and the rest were sizing them up, a row of extremely delicate and pretty young women welcomed them. The 7 ladies immediately took the initiative to wrap their arms around everyone's arms. It was as if they were lovers who hadn't seen each other for a long time. It made people feel an indescribable warmth as if they had returned home. Miss, I'm here to look for Miss Murong Yorua. After all, it was Du Xiaofu's first time coming to such a romantic place. When a young lady came up and wrapped her arms around his arm, he immediately pulled his arm away. Young master, this is where you are wrong. Although I'm not as attractive as little sister Yorua, you should at least ask for my name before looking for little sister Yorua. The delicate young lady looked to be around 22 or 23 years old. When she saw Du Xiaofu's appearance, she immediately gave him a charming glance. Then, she continued to wrap her arms around Du Xiaofu's arm and snorted coquettishly. Then, she turned to Huang San, Commander Zhang, and the rest behind Du Xiaofu and said, Lords, am I right? Yes, what the young lady said is right. Commander Zhang and the rest immediately cheered. So, the young master was here to look for the famous Miss Murong Yorua. She was so young, but she wasn't ordinary. They immediately felt that the distance between them had shortened by quite a bit and they weren't as unfamiliar as before. When Du Xiaofu was teased by Huang San, Commander Zhang, and the rest, he immediately puffed out his chest. He ruthlessly pinched the delicate young lady's perky buttocks and said, You're quite firm. It won't be too late to ask for your name when I come in the future. Young master is amazing. Huang San, Commander Zhang, and the rest were stunned for a moment. Then, they laughed heartily. However, they were quite honest with the young lady beside them. This was because everyone knew that the young ladies in the hometown sold their skills and not their bodies. If they got along well with you, it wouldn't matter if you took advantage of them. If there wasn't any fate, then it wouldn't do. However, the hometown was like this. It made everyone unable to eat it, but it made your heart itch unbearably. This made the business even more popular. Moreover, coming to the hometown was already a symbol of status. The delicate young lady was stunned. She originally thought that this purple-robed young man was coming to the brothel for the first time and was also very handsome. Therefore, she deliberately wanted to tease him. She didn't expect this purple-robed young man to be so bold and direct. However, she didn't seem to be angry. She glanced at Du Xiaofu without changing her expression. However, she was also on guard against Du Xiaofu. She said, Young master is too bad. Isn't it that women don't like bad men? Du Xiaofu pretended to be experienced and smiled faintly. Then, he said to the delicate young lady, All right, bring me to see Miss Murong Yorua. The delicate young lady's expression changed slightly. Then, she said to Du Xiaofu, This young master should be coming here for the first time. You don't know that Sister Yorua isn't someone that anyone can meet. Why is that? Du Xiaofu asked in confusion. The delicate young lady said, Because Sister Yorua is the courtesan of our hometown. All the girls in our hometown sell their skills and not their bodies. Sister Yorua only sees one guest every day. However, she already has a guest today. Is that so? Du Xiaofu frowned. He didn't know if the Murong Yorua of the hometown was really the Murong Yorua he was looking for. Could she really be the courtesan here? Seeing Du Xiaofu's expression, the delicate young lady continued, if this young master really wants to see Sister Yorua, there is a way. In a while, Sister Yorua will be playing the guzheng on the guzheng platform in the pavilion above. Young master can find a private room on the second floor. This way, you can be closer to Sister Yorua. If you are lucky, you will have a chance to see her true appearance. Alright, bring me to the second floor. Du Xiaofu nodded. Then, he said to Huang San, Commander Zhang, and the others behind him, Commander Zhang, Huang San, you guys can go downstairs and play. All the expenses will be on my account. I will go to the second floor to find a friend. Thank you, young Master Xiaofu. We will wait downstairs. Huang San nodded. In his heart, he was thinking, how is this young master going to find a friend? He is obviously going to find the courtesan. Young master, please. The delicate young lady had seen all kinds of people every day. Naturally, she had a discerning eye. She saw that Commander Zhang and the others had an extraordinary aura. However, she was unusually respectful to this purple-robed young man and was even more polite. The private room on the second floor was decorated exquisitely and elegantly. It lacked a sense of splendor but had an additional temperament. It wasn't as noisy as the first floor. It was much quieter and more private. Pushing open the large window of the private room, one could see a platform that was more than 10 meters high. At this moment, there were a few women who could definitely be considered as beauties dancing gracefully. Their graceful bodies twisted and turned, as if they had no bones. They were extremely charming, causing waves of applause from the hall below. Young master, this private room has prepared fine wine, snacks, and fruits. Do you want to call a few girls to chat with you? The girls here all have unique skills. The delicate young lady asked Du Xiaofu. Are there any girls who are spirit symbol masters? Du Xiaofu asked. This. The young lady was stunned. Suddenly, her face twitched. What a joke, how could a noble spirit symbol master fall into the dust of a prostitute? She immediately said, young master really knows how to joke. I am not joking. If there are no girls who are spirit symbol masters, then forget it. You can go down first. I will be here by myself. Du Xiaofu said. Then young master, if you need anything, just call me. The delicate young lady looked at Du Xiaofu strangely, then nodded. Finally, she closed the door of the private room and very politely left. It's midnight. Announced the Martial Gods World's QQ group. Normal book group number, 377451183. Genuine VIP Group World Society Group Number, 250118865. The VIP group requires a Zhu Lang VIP number to join. It requires a screenshot to enter. Brothers who do not have a VIP number do not join. In the World Society, there are Mr. Perfect, Miss Perfect, Little Lolas, Big Sisters, and all kinds of beauties. Brothers who have a VIP number should hurry up and join. Chapter 128. Old Garden, 3rd floor. In an exquisite and spacious private room, a man exuding a faint aura of indifference stared out the window, listening to the noise from the first floor. He frowned slightly, then stood with his hands clasped behind his back and his head lowered, a few strands of hair covering his face. Creak, the door to the private room opened, and another young man walked in. This young man was very fat but very good-looking. His face was even somewhat handsome, and his mouth was also very good-looking, as if he always had a smile on his face. This kind of smile seemed to be able to make the sun suddenly push away the darkness from the clouds, shining in an instant, gentle and at ease. What are you doing here? Looking at the indifferent young man by the window, the fat man closed the door to the private room, then plopped down on the comfortable chair in the private room. Wearing a comfortable robe, he appeared extremely elegant. You should have heard, right? The young man by the window said, not turning around, not even looking back. His voice was also somewhat cold, with a hint of coldness. The fat man's expression immediately became more serious, then a wry smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, saying, "Are you talking about Guokun and Heejun? They were beaten this morning. I received the news in the morning, and at night, someone came to tell me personally. Then, that troublesome master also graced me with his presence. That troublesome master naturally came because of Murong Yorua. I just want to know the background of that brat, and whether he is just a fierce man or a powerful dragon crossing the river." The young man by the window finally turned his head. Under the dim light of the private room, his long black hair with distinct layers, slender and long almond-shaped eyes, and under the high bridge of his nose were two thin lips that held pride. He was dressed in a golden robe, indifferent and arrogant. "I don't know whether he is a powerful dragon crossing the river or a fierce man, but I just received news that the guy who beat up Guokun and Heejun is now on the second floor." The fat man said, then a smile appeared on his face, saying, "But I quite admire that guy. The way he came in is quite special, beating up the son of one of your city guard commanders, and not lightly at that." The indifferent and arrogant young man didn't seem to be interested in how he got in. He looked at the fat young man and raised his eyebrows slightly. "I heard that he stayed at Murong Yorua's place last night. Is he the man of that troublesome master? That's why he dared to touch Guokun and Heejun." "Impossible. Do you think that troublesome master will let a man live under the same roof as Murong Yorua?" The fat young man directly shook his head in denial, and then he said, "Moreover, you should be aware of the character of that troublesome person. He has never been interested in our matters. It's fine so long as we don't offend him. Not to mention that the troublesome person who came here today was probably sent by Murong Yorua to deal with Guokun and Heejun. So, that kid probably isn't that troublesome person's subordinate. What's that guy doing here?" The indifferent young man raised his head slightly when he heard this, and then he gazed at the fat young man and said, "First it was Guokun and Heejun. Could it be that kid is here to look for you?" The fat young man immediately frowned when he heard this, and then he said, "I heard the people below say that he's here to look for Murong Yorua. In that case, that kid might also be here to look for that troublesome master." The indifferent young man looked at the fat young man. A moment later, he said, "Are you interested in meeting that kid? What's wrong with you today?" "Not everyone is qualified to meet us," said the fat young man with a smile. The indifferent young man's eyes flickered a little as he said, "Since he can beat up Guokun and Heejun, he has the qualifications. Now that he's here with you, it's even more fate. How can we not meet him?" On the second floor, in a private room, Du Xiaofu was tasting the good wine on the table. The door of the private room was opened, and the delicate and pretty woman from before walked in respectfully. Her expression and attitude were much more respectful. "You found a talisman master to accompany me to drink?" Du Xiaofu raised his head and asked. The delicate and pretty woman smiled bitterly, and then she respectfully said, "Young master, our young master invites you to the supreme private room on the third floor for a chat." "The young master of the hometown?" Du Xiaofu put down his wine cup and gazed at the delicate and pretty woman. "Yes." The delicate and pretty woman nodded. She was even more unable to guess the identity of this young man before her. Someone who could be valued by her young master was definitely not an ordinary person. Not to mention, her young master had asked her to invite someone and not bring someone. The words were different, so the meaning was naturally different. Du Xiaofu frowned and continued to ask, "Your young master is Meng Laikai?" "Yes." The delicate and pretty woman was stunned, and then she nodded weakly. She was even more amazed by this young man's identity. In Longling City, there were definitely only a handful of people who could directly address the young master by his name. "Go back and tell Meng Laikai that if he's here because of Guokun and Heejun, then don't bother me because I will beat him up." Du Xiaofu looked at the delicate and pretty woman and said, "If Meng Laikai is here to apologize to me because of what happened outside, then come down by yourself. I can't be bothered to go up. I'll go and inform the young master right away." The delicate and pretty woman was startled, and then she left the private room while trembling. Meng Lai Kai, Du Xiaofu softly muttered. Recently, his complexion had returned to normal, and he continued to drink the good wine on the table, afraid that it would go to waste. Did that kid really say that? In the private room on the third floor, the chubby young man looked at the delicate and pretty woman and asked. His eyes were wide open on his chubby face. The delicate and pretty woman nervously nodded and replied, "Young master, that's what that young man said," not missing a single word. "All right, you can leave now." The chubby young man waved his hand at the delicate and pretty woman. The delicate and pretty woman nodded and left the private room reluctantly. "What do you think?" After the delicate and pretty woman left, the indifferent young man said to the chubby young man. There was a smile in his eyes, and he looked interested. He said softly, "I'm really curious. Where did that guy come from? I can't see through him at all." Sigh, the chubby young man stood up and stretched his back. He said, "Since he wants me to go down and apologize, then I have to go down and apologize. Open the door to do business, and everyone who enters is a customer. I have to make them feel at home. Since I have nothing to do, I'll go take a walk," the indifferent young man said. In the private room, Du Xiaofu, who was drinking good wine, looked up. The noise and music from the first floor suddenly quieted down, and the dancing women on the platform quietly retreated. "Now, Miss Yorua, please perform the Traceless song for us." A refreshing voice resounded throughout the old garden. Then, purple flower petals began to fall from the platform. The surrounding white fog spread, and it was hazy. Instantly, the entire platform was shrouded in it. "Miss Yorua has come out. Miss Yorua." All of a sudden, the entire old garden was filled with enthusiastic cheers and shouts. Du Xiaofu looked out the window of the private room. While he was still in shock, a beautiful figure seemed to have already sat on the platform. Then, he heard a ding sound. It was crisp and melodious, like a celestial sound that resounded in the old garden. Then, the noise in the entire garden quieted down. Du Xiaofu's gaze was fixed on the figure shrouded in fog and purple petals floating in the air. At this moment, he could vaguely see that it was a graceful woman. The woman sat upright, and in the fog, there was a guzheng placed in front of her. Her 10 fingers gently plucked the strings, and the sound of nature gradually approached from afar. At the beginning, the sound was refreshing and undulating, with endless charm. When one listened carefully, it seemed to have a magical power, causing one to gradually become intoxicated. In the vast illusory universe, a chance encounter is unforgettable. When we meet in the early summer, I leave behind a smile. Since we don't know each other, what harm is there? That year, it was drizzling, and a guzheng song stretched across the lotus pond. At the point where the water met the sky, a pleasure boat floated over, and a pair of mandarin ducks flew away. Since I don't look back, why not forget? Since we are not fated, why make an oath? Everything that happened today was like water without a trace. In the sound of the lantern, the sky was still cold, and the water was still cold. In the dream, the guzheng sang softly. Outside the building, outside the mountain, the outsider of the building has not returned. Looking back, I have long passed the river of forgetfulness, and the person playing the guzheng teared up. What day is it? You are already a stranger. Today is not yesterday. Autumn is the same as before, and I am empty and thin. A crisp and melodious female voice came along with the sound of the guzheng. It was crisp and gentle, as if it was telling the thoughts of a young girl. At first, it was charming and gentle, but then it became gentle and resentful. It made one feel an indescribable sense of sorrow when listening to it. The old garden was originally a noisy place. However, after the guzheng music stopped, the entire garden was still silent. It made one intoxicated and unable to recover for a long time. Creak, the door of a private room on the second floor opened, and an indifferent young man and a fat young man walked in. Du Xiaofu was still looking at the fog and purple petals outside the window. He did not even lift his eyes. Miss Yorua, what do you think of this song? The fat young man was not unfamiliar with it. he directly sat beside Du Xiaofu. Actually, I don't understand. Although the song is not bad, I keep feeling that it is missing something. Du Xiaofu's eyes moved slightly. After listening to the flute music of the beautiful woman in the Savage Beast mountain range, although this Guzheng song was pleasant to listen to and could be remembered for 3 days, it was naturally not enough in comparison. Du Xiaofu said, "That song is about love. I don't understand it, so it's not good for me to comment." The fat young man's gaze fell on Du Xiaofu in surprise, and then he continued to ask, "Then what do you think of the name of this place, the Old Garden?" Du Xiaofu raised his head and looked at the fat young man. He said, "No makeup, no adornment, no gentleness, a weak body, a strong husband. Under the fence, self-pity stands empty, the world looks for a marquis. Born simple, it is difficult to gain favor, the heart is too delicate, easily sensitive to autumn. Knowing early on that there is a difference between warmth and coldness, the Old Garden is conservative and romantic. The Old Garden is a good name, but it is a waste to use it on you." Chapter 129. As Du Xiaofu's voice faded, the chubby youth's face could not help but twitch. The indifferent youth stared curiously at Du Xiaofu. After sizing him up for a while, he chuckled and said, "Ha, it is indeed a little spoiled." At this moment, Du Xiaofu's gaze also landed on the indifferent young man. Even though the indifferent young man had restrained himself very well, Du Xiaofu could still sense an arrogant aura from the young man. Under his calm eyes, there was a sharp and frightening gaze hidden. "I know that he should be Meng Laikai." "Then you are." Du Xiaofu looked at the indifferent youth and pondered for a moment. After which, he said, "If I am not wrong, you should be the last of the Lanling 4 young masters, Han Xian, right? The Lanling 4 young masters are deliberately made up by some bored people. Please excuse me." The indifferent youth tacitly admitted that he was Han Xian. Without needing Du Xiaofu to greet him, he directly sat down beside Meng Laikai and said, "I also know about you today. You are Du Xiaofu. More and more people will know about me." Du Xiaofu nodded. After which, he looked at Meng Laikai and said, "If you want to apologize to me, you don't have to come personally." Meng Laikai looked at Du Xiaofu and thought to himself, "Didn't you ask me to come personally?" While Meng Laikai was thinking to himself, Du Xiaofu continued, "As long as you waive the bill for my drinks tonight, I will be very happy. I will waive all your expenses tonight." Meng Laikai looked at Du Xiaofu with his chubby face and tried his best to maintain his poise. He said, "Do you want me to find you a few more girls?" Meng Laikai couldn't help but add, "It's also free." "No need. I am not a casual person." Du Xiaofu's eyes lit up when he heard that. Then, he said regretfully, "If only you were my friend. With a friend like you, I would be very happy in the future." "If you think we're friends, we'll be friends right away," Meng Laikai said as he looked at Du Xiaofu. "At least we're not friends yet." Du Xiaofu shook his head and said to Meng Laikai, "Are you sure you didn't come looking for me because of He Jun and Guokun?" "No, our relationship with them is very subtle, but it's not to the point where we need to take the initiative to stand up for them," Han Xian said to Du Xiaofu. "That's good. I thought I was going to hit someone again. I really don't want to hit anyone today." Du Xiaofu took a deep breath. Then, he looked at Meng Laikai and said, "I want to see Miss Murong Yorua. You are the boss here. You should be able to arrange it, right?" Du Xiaofu's words once again made Han Xian and Meng Laikai feel uneasy. Meng Laikai was stunned. Then, he looked at Han Xian. His gaze fluctuated. Finally, he looked at Du Xiaofu again and asked, "As far as I know, you and Miss Murong Yorua are very close. Why are you looking for her?" "I don't know. She asked me to come." Du Xiaofu sighed. Han Xian's indifferent gaze fluctuated a little. Then, he looked at Meng Laikai and said, "Miss Yorua seems to be accompanying that person on the 3rd floor, right?" Meng Laikai was stunned. Then, He smiled and looked at Du Xiaofu, saying, although I'm the boss here, I really can't intervene in Miss Yorua's matters. She should be accompanying an important guest now. If you want to find her, I can let you go. But when the time comes, don't say that we brought you there. Just say that you wanted to go there. Du Xiaofu looked at the two of them and said, all right, bring me there. Meng Likai nodded. Then, the three of them went to the third floor together. On the third floor, in a quiet and elegant private room, everything was decorated in an antique style. A thin young man stood beside a graceful woman in a purple dress. The young man was very handsome. He had big charming eyes that were deep and bright. His delicate face was like a woman's. Especially his lips, which were outlined in a dazzling smile. Yorua, you know that you don't have to stay in your hometown. I don't want you to be stared at by other men every day. There are no good men, the thin young man said as he looked at the graceful woman. The graceful woman in the purple dress smiled. Her delicate body was like a jade willow, light and tender. Her smile was very beautiful. Not only was she beautiful, but she also had a very elegant temperament. Especially when she had just finished playing the zither, there was an antique aura. She was as beautiful as a fairy who had walked out of a painting. She was Murong Yorua. Alright, don't talk about this anymore. Thank you for coming today. Murong Yorua smiled at the thin young man. She pulled the thin young man to a seat without much restraint. It seemed that their relationship was not shallow. Guokun and Hejun, those two blind things, clearly know that you are my woman. How dare they cause trouble for you? It seems that I am usually too gentle, the thin young man said. The skinny young man said with a cold expression, I'll get them to apologize to you personally. When did I become your woman? Murong Yorua looked at the thin young man and smiled. You. I don't know what to say about you. But I want to know who that kid is. Why are you so nervous about him? The thin young man stared at Murong Yorua, waiting for her answer. I am not nervous about him. For some reason, Murong Yorua's reaction to this sentence was particularly big. There was even a little blush on her cheeks. It seemed that she did not dare to look directly into the thin young man's eyes. He saved me and even helped Xingyu. It was because of me that he got into trouble. So, I hope that he will be fine. You two are related. You just blushed. I have known you for so long, and this is the first time you are like this. You don't even dare to look into my eyes. So, you two are definitely related. The thin young man looked at Murong Yorua, his gaze fluctuating. Creak, at this moment, the door of the private room was opened. Then, 3 people walked in. Looking at the 3 people who came in, Murong Yorua raised her head. Her eyes were filled with surprise. Du Xiaofu followed Han Xian and Meng Likai to a private room on the 3rd floor. Without knocking, Meng Likai directly pushed the door open and saw Murong Yorua sitting together with a young man in the private room. This Murong Yorua was the Murong Yorua that Du Xiaofu was looking for. From Guokun's words in the morning, Du Xiaofu had already guessed that Murong Yorua was the famous courtesan of the old flower garden in the entire Lanling prefecture city. But for some reason, as soon as he walked into the private room, he saw Murong Yorua sitting together with a young man. The two of them were sitting very close to each other. They were even holding hands. It was obvious that their relationship was not shallow. This made Du Xiaofu feel unhappy. At this moment, the thin young man's gaze also fell on Han Xian, Meng Likai, and Du Xiaofu. His large eyes were slightly cold. He opened his mouth and said softly, Han Xian, Meng Likai, the two of you are becoming more and more unruly. First, it was Guokun and Hejun. Now, it's the two of you. It seems that the so-called 4 bears of Lanling are looking down on me more and more. The thin young man's voice was very pleasant. He did not give Han Xian and Meng Likai any face at all. He directly called the Hulun young masters the 4 bears of Lanling. However, Han Xian and Meng Likai were not angry at all in the face of this thin young man. It was as if being scolded by this thin young man was a very normal thing. Meng Laikai, in particular, had to put on a smile. He then pointed at Du Xiaofu and said, "How would we dare to disturb you? We couldn't stop him. He was the one who insisted on looking for Miss Yorua." As Meng Lightsai's voice faded, the thin young man's gaze fell on Du Xiaofu. "Du Xiaofu!" Murong Yorua exclaimed in shock. Then, she got up and went to Du Xiaofu's side. She did not expect Du Xiaofu to come in with Meng Laikai and Han Xian. She smiled apologetically and said, "I was worried about whether I had come in with you. I forgot to arrange for you to come in. I'm really sorry. I thought it might be someone with the same name. I didn't expect it to be you." Du Xiaofu was surprised to see Murong Yorua, but he was not surprised. He then said to Murong Yorua, "It doesn't matter. Anyway, I came in and heard a moving song. It was very pleasant to listen to." Murong Yorua smiled faintly and said, "I'm sorry." Meng Laikai stared at Du Xiaofu from the side with a look of disdain. He thought to himself, "This guy clearly didn't say that in front of us. He clearly said that the zither music was still lacking." "It was really pleasant to listen to," Du Xiaofu said seriously. "Yorua, so this kid is the Du Xiaofu you were talking about." The thin young man also got up and walked to Murong Yorua's side. Then, he took Murong Yorua's hands and played with them in his white palms, as if declaring his sovereignty. He glanced at Du Xiaofu and said, "You look like a kid who is still wet behind the ears. I'm a little surprised that you can beat He Jun." Du Xiaofu didn't know why, but when he saw the thin young man playing with Murong Yorua's hand, he felt even more uncomfortable. He listened to the thin young man's words and said, "You also surprised me. It turns out that a man can be as good-looking as you. You look like a woman, but I feel that you're too feminine." Du Xiaofu didn't know why. "Kid, I dare you to say it again." The thin young man's anger suddenly surged. Du Xiaofu had never been a person who gave in or was threatened. He immediately said, "I said you look like a woman. What's wrong with that? I admire your courage." As the skinny young man's voice faded, a terrifying aura erupted from his skinny body. This aura was so powerful that it caused the entire room to tremble. Han Xian's and Meng Lightsai's expressions changed, but a faint smile appeared in their eyes. "I'm a little slow writing today. There are more chapters, but brothers, save them for tomorrow. Don't delay your rest." You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.